Our business, I'm going to call to order the meeting of the California Architects Board. And Ms. Secretary, will you take a roll call?
John Baker.
Here.
Denise Campos here. Tian Feng.
Here.
Pascal Gutierrez.
Here.
Sylvia Kwan. Here. Ebony Lewis. Here. Matthew McGinnis. Here. Robert Perlman.
Here.
Nelson Serrano has an excused absence, and Barry Williams.
Here.
So we have quorum.
Great, thank you. So let me start with just a few procedural remarks that will set the day. It's going to be a long day, so everybody just chill and we'll get through it. The first thing is that our meeting is being webcast because it's really exciting and everybody wants to watch it. We are going to be going into closed session at approximately 9:15-ish, and we will reconvene the public session, the open session, at about 1:45 or so. And so just to remind everybody about voting, board members, all motions and seconds will be repeated for the record, and all votes on all motions will be taken by roll call. So the secretary, you're aware of that. The next item on the agenda is to take any public comments on items that are not on the agenda.
Hi, good morning. My name is Dustin Maxson, and I've talked with you a few times in the past, as well as attended many LATC meetings. So I'm going to try to be brief, but I just want to update you on sort of our frustration a little bit. So we've talked to you about the barriers to entry that exist in our profession, and we've all come together and we've built a consensus to implement new pathways to licensure. You've heard us. We've been through the process. You voted last December, and you approved regulatory changes to make this happen. At the time, I think you authorized your executive director to approve text edits to implement those changes as well. And so it was our understanding that the sort of regulatory package was going to start moving through the pipeline. This spring, I was informed that that was not the case, and that the text edits to the regulations were more substantial than were anticipated. And so they have been further revised by staff, and they've gone back to the LATC for, I guess, approval, and then with the end game of coming back to you for another approval before moving on into the process. The LATC took about a 6-month break between meetings. In November, they just met in May. And they did approve the changes to the regulation, but they decided not to move it on to you. And it's my understanding because of the issue with the application questionnaire regarding experience. The issue, I believe, is that you can't ask a question about experience if that is not found in the statute or regulation. So there's sort of a catch-22 that's developing here, and the form that was presented to the committee by staff, the committee is not happy with, because what they really want is an internship program similar to your AXP, which my colleagues and I are in full support of, but that's an end game. That's not something that you can invent right out of the bat, especially when CLARB, our Council of Registration Boards, doesn't have the interest in doing so. So what we need is an interim solution where a simple form, probably something similar to your board used at one time, is implemented with these changes, and so we can keep the process moving. Where I believe it's at right now is staff. I think the motion was to approve the edits, but put them on hold and direct staff to do further research into how the form can be developed. And from our belief, forms change all the time. There are administrative changes to forms. Every form doesn't have to be approved by committee or board. So we don't understand why the regulation is being held up and the form can't be further developed over the year-long process that the regulatory package moves forward. So where we are right now, staff is in May directed to do research. So they would come back in July, and then if a miracle happened, staff would have a form that the committee would approve, which doesn't look like that's possible, because they're sort of giving each other impossible tasks. And so if a miracle happened in July, it would come back to you in September, in which case you could reapprove it then. So we're almost a full year from where we were last December. It doesn't look like that's going to happen because staff at this point has only been directed to do research. So they would come back with their findings in July, and then the best case scenario right now is it looks like we would see you again in December, a full year later from when we last approved it. My concern is we've never had 5 members on our committee. We've always had 3 or 4 in the 6 years I've been at this. Members change. I think 2 expired in June. And then we have a new member that just joined who has been in opposition to these changes in the past. Doug has left us. And so my concern is that this is going to stall and sort of get left in the wash. And so I'm here today to beg for your help and to ask that you perhaps call individually the committee members and express your concern and help them, with a little bit of motivation to move this along quicker. I mean, this is an important change. There are ethical reasons, there are legal reasons this needs to happen. The system we have now has barriers to entry, it's exclusionary, and it's protectionist to a small group of individuals. There's also no public seat on the committee. The entire committee is licensed California landscape architects. I know because I've tried to get on the committee. So again, this is just background information. There's a group of us that have worked really hard to build consensus. We've been to public forums, we've been to countless LATC meetings, and we just don't want to see this get lost. So I know you have a long day, so I don't want to take any more time, but I just want to tell you where we're at, and please beg you to help us, push things along a little bit faster. Thank you for your time.
Thank you. Can you spell your last name for me?
Sure, Maxim, M-A-X-A-M.
Thank you,
Yeah.
Mr. Maxon.
Thanks.
Thank you for your comments. All right. Yes, are there any other public comments? Okay, hearing none. Let us go right on schedule to close session. Yeah, wow, how did we do that? So, so those of you who aren't going to be in the closed session, you're excused. Back to the open session of California Architects Board meeting. And the first thing that I would like to report on is the action taken during the closed session regarding the EO, Executive Officer Appointment. And during closed session, pursuant to Government Code Section 11126A1, the board has made a decision. Next item on the agenda is, I guess we don't have to do the meeting minutes, we'll just go right to the budget.
We can always go back to it. Yeah.
Okay, so the next item is updating the board's budget, and Robert De La Reyes, manager of the DCA Budget Office, will present this item. Welcome, Robert.
Thank you. Good afternoon, everyone. Thank you for having me. My name is Robert De La Reyes. I serve the board as your budget manager over at the Department of Consumer Affairs. I'm here with actually Paul McDermott. He is the newly assigned budget analyst for the board. We're here to give you guys a brief budget update. But before I get into that, I want to do kind of a quick introduction to what our role is in the department and what we do. So our main role in the department is to facilitate the annual budget process. So let me ask, what is that? So the annual budget process is, simply put, is the process you would have to go through in order to adjust your budget, make a change to your budget. So this effort typically happens around the fall, around August and September. That's where our goal is significantly increased. So we ultimately, what we do, we always plan a year in advance. So in the state, we operate by fiscal year. So July 1st is the beginning of the year, June 30th is the end. In the state, we don't start from scratch. We don't build a budget from scratch. What we do is incrementally budget. So we would take your approved budget and we would use that as our baseline to incrementally adjust it based on resource need or adjustments that are essentially out of your control, which are directed by the Department of Finance. The Department of Finance is the governance of fiscal matters in the state of California. So as you know, if there's negotiations going around about salary increases for specific classifications, benefit increases, retirement changes, they would issue instructions during this time when we build the budget in the fall to help ensure that your budget has adequate funding to ensure those increases are accountable. Adjustments that you do have control over are budget change proposals. If you're familiar with those, budget change proposals is the vehicle you would use to address something specific to the board. For example, you would increase your level of staff to address issues for enforcement, licensing backlogs, increases in workload, and you would use that as a vehicle to increase your resources. That's also considered in the fall to be a part of your budget. So once that is reviewed and approved by the Department of Finance, that is now included as part of the administration's budget. So the administration's budget is also known as the governor's budget. That's the term we use. So that's released every January 10th to be released to the public, as well as it kicks off the next phase, which is the review of the legislature. So the legislature reviews your budget, and our role there is to, of course, assist the board in answering any questions they may have in regards to budget change proposals you may submit or any adjustments to your budget, as well as the department's budget. So we're there to serve as your liaison to help answer those questions, to ensure their reviews. Ultimately, the last phase of the budget process, how I like to define it, is budget monitoring. And that's why we're here today, is to go through the set of documents that you guys have in front of you, which you should be familiar with. You have the expenditure projection document, which is the first one. There's this one right here, which is called. Then the second document we'll go through is the fund position statement. So these are tools we use in the office to help, one, monitor your spending throughout the fiscal year, and second, monitor the solvency of your funding to support your operations. And we use to support your local spending. And ultimately, the third document is just more for your reference, it's historical reference in way of the bar chart. And that's just for more of your information. So to start off, let's talk about this fiscal year expenditure projections. So the short and sweet of it is really kind of on the bottom right-hand corner. As you can see, you are reverting about 10%, 11% round one of your budget, or $400,000. That's the short and sweet of it. But to qualify that and to understand what that is, I'm going to give you a brief introduction of how your budget is made up and how it's built. So there's two main sections of your budget. So the first main section is the top part of this projection, which is personal services. So those are costs related to salaries, benefits, seasonal staff, if you need it, as well as board member per diem. That would come out of that top section. That's how we project costs. Those are where the costs regarding those matters come from that top section. The second main component of your budget is operating expenses. So these are overhead costs to support those positions, to support board operations, general expense, office supplies, communications, cell phone bills, enforcement costs, in regards to the Attorney General to adjudicate some of your investigations or complaints, and subject matter experts, so arbitration contracts would also come out of this one. So to qualify that, if you look at the $400,000 figure, if you look at the far right of that document, it shows that we're projecting you guys to spend based on the information position that's available to us and what that balance, the remaining balance will be. So if you want to qualify at a $400,000 figure, the majority of it is coming from the personal services area of your budget. What that tells me is that you have vacancies that you've experienced throughout fiscal year. As we all know, Doug left middle of the year, so as long as that's vacant, you're accumulating savings without hiring someone. So you have savings there. So the majority of that savings, which is roughly about $260,000 of the 400, comes from those salaries. It comes from those vacant positions.
Does the savings stay with the department?
Yeah, so that stays within your fund.
No.
No, it stays within your fund. So anything that you don't spend, it goes back to your fund. And I can explain that in the next document, which is the fund condition. So that's the short and sweet of it. So my suggestion is, once you fill those vacancies, don't expect to see kind of that level of savings income. Once you fill them and they're filled throughout the fiscal year, you're looking more towards the $160,000 bracket, to where it's only if you spend what you spent in operating expenses this year, that's how much you would potentially revert each year or save. So I can start with questions on this document if you may have it, or if not, I can move on to the second document, which is the fund condition.
Sure. Questions about content and numbers?
Yeah, absolutely.
First question is, why do you call it budget stone?
That's a good question.
I've never heard that before.
Yeah, that's a good question. I try to not use that terminology, like, trying to explain it to folks that don't understand budget stuff. But budget stone is usually our final budget. So, as you know, and as I explained, the budget process is year-long, where budget stone is typically your final budget, where we can make changes to your budget within the current year. So if there's changes to, for example, salary increases that may have been approved, which we need to account for this fiscal year, we could increase your budget than whatever that final tally is would be in the budget for that current fiscal year. So you call it budget stone just to say that this is your final budget. It's etched in stone.
So my real question after that one is, you get down to expenditures, there's a big jump this fiscal year in equipment and printing. What's stimulating that? Are we replacing some things, or is it?
That's a good question.
So each year we plan what equipment we need for the next fiscal year, and if it gets approved, then that gets added to our budget authority. So in this particular year, it might have covered some new monitors, new PCs, things like that. So we just plan the next year what we need, and then they add that amount to our budget.
So you didn't buy much of anything last year, did you?
Yeah, so it just depends. Like some years we might buy printers or a copier, or it just varies. Laptops.
And that's what we qualify as a discretionary cost, whether board staff would have that discretion to spend what they would need for a given fiscal year. Any questions? Okay, so with that said, that's the expenditure projection document, and that essentially leads to the fund condition. So there's a difference between what's available in your fund versus what your budget is. So your budget is a component of what we cover to monitor your fund. So this fund condition is ultimately a balance statement. You take what your beginning balance is, factor in what you actually collect in revenue, and offset that in regards to what you spend. And once you get that impact to your fund, whether it's a positive or negative, whether you collect more revenue than you spend, or you spend more than what you collect in revenue in a given fiscal year, then that's how we would monitor your fund. Now, the metric we use to monitor this is months of reserve. So if you're not familiar with that, it's essentially, to simply put it, if you stop collecting revenue in a given fiscal year, you only have X amount of months that you can sustain yourselves in regards to what you plan on spending in a given fiscal year. So right now, there's really, looking at it, you guys are pretty healthy. How we monitor your fund, if you're approaching the 24-month threshold, which is a law that if you go beyond that, then you would have to start visiting options to limit your surplus, either decreasing fees or increasing spending, whatever the case may be, or what we use as an indicator, 3 months in reserve, to where you would need to start looking looking at options to address a potential insolvency in the future. So you would have to go increase your fees, increase the level of spending, those are options on the table. So right now, if you look at it, you're about 14 months in reserve, which ended last fiscal year, and we're projecting you, if we're looking out 2 years in advance, about 8 months. So you're right there in the middle of it, and really no concerns from our shop.
These numbers are millions.
Yes, yes. So
Doesn't say that anywhere.
yeah,
Like
we're talking about-
2.7, we're good.
yeah, so I don't know, maybe the number was raised, and I apologize. Yeah, dollars are in thousands. Yeah, those are in thousands. So we're talking 3 million.
Can you explain to Robert how the fund condition for the year, the future fiscal years, it plans for spending your full budget and conservative on the revenues?
Right, so regards to that, so the fund condition, besides the actual year, which is 16-17, which shows actual spending revenues that are collected, all the years after that is projected. So we project the board to fully fulfill their budget. So it's showing that we fully expend your total budget, because we don't incorporate savings in future years. And the revenue is conservative projection. So we work with AP and staff to ensure that we're estimating conservatively and aggressively to ensure that we're giving you guys a pretty conservative picture. But again, you could collect more, less than what we're projecting. So.
So under supplemental pension program or supplemental pension payments, there weren't any in 16, 17, 17, 18. And we've got 44,000
Yeah.
for the next 3 years. Is that a new thing?
Yes.
And how come it's not going up each year?
So, great question. So, last year there was legislation that was passed for the state to inject one time about $6 billion to the Calvary Fund. So this isn't specific to your program. This is just statewide that happened last fiscal year. So the $44,000 is your plan to pay back that loan. So that loan was essentially everyone in the state. Every state program that has staff that pays into the contribution to the Calvary Fund. This is your schedule to pay that loan out. And the loan is, or the payment, excuse me, the repayment of that $6 billion injection of cash is about 8 years. That's the projection. And that's conservative too. So those assessments are done by the Department of Finance, and they're the ones relaying that information around the fall. This is us just showing a conservative estimate that if it's 44,000 projected next year, we're going to assume that that's going to be the level of your repayment each year.
Is it an interest-free loan?
No. I don't think so.
I guess we have no choice. I mean, you give it the money supposedly. So
Right. That's a decision that was made at a much higher level than where we're at today. But yeah, just to wrap it up, I mean, really no concerns in our shop. We consider your budget very healthy. What you guys spend and save a year is very, very healthy. So really no concerns over that. Questions?
It looks like we're, except for,
So there is a revised one, it's
Oh.
just slightly revised.
Oh.
It was. It was a handout.
What's the typical process if we're in red, let's say the expenditure is a little larger than the budget, perhaps?
If you overspend your budget?
Is it penalized next year? Or?
Great question. So there's government code where the executive officer is financially liable for that. So that's typically what we use to ensure that, to educate our executive officers in emergency. If you overspend your budget, that is an additional option, is that there's a financial, you may be financially liable for that. So there's,
Personally?
what's that?
You mean personally?
Yeah, I mean, that's how it's interpreted, not you, but the executive officer.
When I'm out of the position.
But I'll tell you, there's a lot of options that are explored a lot of resources that are exhausted before that happened.
No, the reason is you say our department is very healthy, that implies the other department may have red in red.
Absolutely, absolutely. What we do in the department, we have 40 other programs that all have the same process. So every program has a different level of spending. They all have their own mission, their own staff, their own way of going about things. And we've seen it. But we are here, that we exist to ensure that doesn't happen. We constantly talk to Vicky and staff, if not daily, weekly, monthly, to ensure that we are within that.
Any questions?
Very good.
Very good.
Thank you guys for sticking around.
Yeah, of course.
Yeah,
Thanks
it's
for
good to know
having
we're
us.
healthy.
Yeah, you guys.
We're good.
Thanks for having us.
Yeah. Yep. Item G. So we're gonna go back to item G, which is, I'm gonna ask for a motion to approve the March 1st, 2018 ordinance.
I make a motion to approve the meeting.
For a second.
Second.
Yep.
John Baker.
Aye.
Denise Campos. I. Tian Ping.
Aye.
Pascal Gutierrez.
Yes.
Sylvia Kwan.
Aye.
Ebony Lewis. Matthew McGinnis.
Aye.
Robert Pierman.
Abstain.
Barry Williams.
Let's see, where are we? Are we doing item I now?
You want me to do the updating of
Oh, we skipped H2. Oh, yeah.
I can do it.
So we actually have to go back to item H1, which is the interim executive officer's report on, and Vicky, Mayor, will be on it.
So, I'll try to be brief on it because we're running a little behind, but basically, we have a September board meeting on the 12th in the Bay Area, and Sylvia has offered to try and get us the census report after we've met before. And then in December, House Wall had suggested for our 2-day meeting, which one day would be strategic planning, that one of the days be at the local community college with an architecture program. So we're trying to make that connection. So we might meet one day at the community college and then the second day do our strategic planning at the library that we normally meet in December. As for the business modernization project, formerly known as BREEZE, staff worked really hard and approved our business processes, and it was submitted to the department in May. So in October, we're going to start beginning the mapping process, which we use our subject matter experts in-house, and they begin to flow chart the work with the consultants of the department. So we're moving forward. It's progressing, so we're on track with that. At the last meeting, we talked about the credit card payments as a possibility, as a stopgap measure while we wait for the business modernization project, because it seems unreasonable that we can't accept a credit card for renewals. So we're one of the few boards that are going to be in the first project of implementing that. They're working on a contract. So we've also been working with legal counsel whether or not we can pass that fee on to the licensee or whether or not the board can absorb it. So we're working out those details. The executive committee met on May 16th and they reviewed both sunset review reports. They gave us some input, which is been incorporated into it, which we'll be discussing under agenda item I. One of the communications committee's strat plan objectives was to issue a consumer article in the department's Consumer Connection magazine, and that's supposed to be published this Friday. So it talks about natural disasters and how to avoid any pitfalls in the rebuilding process, and it gives some consumer information. So that's one of our first articles in that magazine. I think it was a suggestion from Denise or Nilza on that committee. So staff have been working with the department to get that going. Also, when we met with AIACC and the emerging professionals, they showed us their infographic on a license path, and they asked us for input on it. So Marcus's crew is getting some input to that infographic and working with them on that. We also are doing a new license lookup on our website. It's supposed to be more current, we need smartphone capability, and landscape is also in that project, so we hope to have that up and running soon. The rulemaking package that the board approved at a prior meeting to reduce the Cse wait time to retake the exam. Marcus's staff had prepared the regulatory package and they filed it with legislative and regulatory review, I believe, yesterday. So that's the first step in the regulatory review process, so it's on its way. For the enforcement stats, you may see an increase in the amount of pending complaints for the prior month of April, and in May it reduced down to 20, it was 167, and it reduced down to 147. We do have some vacancies in that unit. We tried to redirect some work, so we hope to get the pending down to a more reasonable amount. Going to the landscape program, Patricia Trowett joined us after lunch as the chair of the LATC, so she'll be here for Brianna's update about their May meeting. But Patricia was reappointed as a committee member on the 8th, I believe, and it's until 2022, correct? So we have a break. We're going to swear her in for her reappointment. The Assembly Speaker also appointed a new member. It was a position that had been vacant almost 4 years, and it had 1.5 months left on a 4-year term. And they appointed Susan Landry on, I believe it was April 18th, mid-April.
Yeah.
And so her term fortunately expired June 1st, but she's in her 1-year grace, and there's a possibility that she'll be reappointed. So she was able to attend their May meeting, and she contributed a lot for her very first meeting, so that was very beneficial. I won't go into much about LATC because Brianna's going to be giving an update on their May meeting, and a lot of their current projects are covered in her report. And then we have the enforcement matrix after the June report. So that's basically it. Unless you have any questions or anything you want me to expand on? Any questions?
So, the next item is under tab I, and it's basically Vicky's spin to talk about the executive committee's recommendation to the board regarding our 2017-18 strategic plan to prepare for the sunset review.
So, as you know, each year, the Assembly VP Committee and the Senate Professions and Economic Development Committee, they hold these joint sunset review hearings for the boards under the department. And this is our year to prepare the report. And it gives us an opportunity to discuss our performance, and then the legislature may make recommendations to the board that you can implement. So the graphic in your packet, I think it's attachment 1 in the PDF. It's a graphic that the department provided to the boards that are currently under review, and it pretty much depicts where we are. We're right now reviewing a draft of the 2 sunset reports. We haven't received the template, that's the questionnaire that the report responds to, but we're using the 2017 template as a guide. There were a few, maybe about 5 new questions in the 2017 template that were different from when the board was under review in 2014. So what's in your packet is using our 2014 responses and plugging them into the 2017 template, but we may get a new template that may have some new questions, or maybe they revise the existing questions. So we're, I think, very much on track. The board will have another opportunity to review the draft reports in September. So today, we're asking for the board's review and input into the 2 reports, and then we'll incorporate your suggestions into them. We'll then present it again to the LETC. They reviewed it in May, but we'll present it again to them in July. And then the reports will come back to the board again in September, hopefully to give a final approval and maybe delegate to the new executive officer to make minor changes if needed. The hearing is expected to take place more than likely in February or March. And a couple of weeks prior to the hearing, we'll be given a background paper, which gives the board the opportunity to do some fact checking and to prepare a written response. And that's what will be addressed at the hearing. And we're not given much time, but we quickly have to turn that around. And then we do a formal response 30 days after the hearing, I believe is the due date for that. Normally at the hearing, the current board president and current LATC testify. So depending upon who's the president and the chair, respectively, they'll do the testimony at the hearing. And then the executive officer is there as well. So they normally have like an opening speech where each side will give their presentation, and then maybe the majority of it, the executive officer will address the specific issues. So we'll work with the president and the chair and come up with some language to present to the committee that addresses the issues that were brought up. The LATC did appoint a two-person working group. It's Patricia and Annie Bowden, who, if we need help or advice on a particular question, we can defer to them. Recently, we sent them our response to section number 7, and they provided input into that. But for the board, our input was given by the executive committee when they met in May. So it's a similar process. I think that's pretty much it. So I don't know what the pleasure of the board is, if you want to go through the Sunset report section by section, if you have any input that you want us to consider or some suggested changes. I don't know how much you were able to review each section.
If you would, can we maybe start, you highlight the changes of the new information from 14,
Okay.
17.
So, okay, so in section 1 for the board, the committee thought it would be helpful that we add a statement in there how an LETC member comes to our meetings and acts as a liaison between the board and the committee, and vice versa with LATC. TN is the liaison for the LATC. So we thought about adding, we haven't added this in yet, but we thought about adding a statement on page 2 of section 1, the third paragraph. We thought that might be the best opportunity to put that in there. So we can work on some language on that. The definitions of the committees on page 3, it was suggested by the executive committee. It usually had a statement about being an editorial body, and it was suggested that we massage that wording some, so it's not really an editorial body. And so we revised that. So they also asked us to add something in about the social media. So if you look under communications committee, the charges, we kind of rewrote that a little bit differently. There was some maybe concern that we just verify the attendance for the board members just to make sure it's accurate. So we are double checking that. We will be adding the March meeting attendance to the bottom of each member's chart and today's meeting. You'll notice that as we get further into the charts, the current fiscal year is blank, and obviously at the end of the month we'll be able to add the fiscal year data. And a lot of the questions ask for trends. So in order to come up with those trends, you have to have all the data in order to say what it is. So we've kind of left the prior wording, but we will be revising that based on the data that we get. So all the attendants are gonna be verifying all that. On page 12 of section 1, under the IPAL program, the committee wanted us to focus about how California has several of the approved IPAL programs in the nation. So at the end of that paragraph under IPAL, we tried to get that in there. So if you have a different suggestion, that helped capture it.
That's, yeah, probably doesn't have the full board's input. And we thought at the executive committee it was important that it's a major change of the new additions since 2014. Do you have any thoughts on that?
As we said, to date, there are 26 programs at 21 participating schools around the country, with California having 5 programs, the most of any participating state. So we thought that helped highlight it.
Might as well show it off a little bit.
Yeah.
Because we're expected to be leaders, in everything we do, so it's no different.
If there's nothing else for section 1, we can go on to section 2. Section 2 is mainly our performance measures.
Okay. Did we talk about the shortening the waiting period for secondary?
Yes, yeah. It is on page 13 of section 1, and then it is in a couple other places. So after the committee meeting, they suggested that we add it more if we can. So Marcus found 1 or 2 places where we could increase
Visibility.
visibility of it. Yeah.
So I don't know if there's any public member here who's not, they will feel better that we responded very effectively. But I don't think now they're not here. We will call for a shortened period.
Yeah, I noticed that we could probably insert the CSE 180 to 90 on page 15 above contest of citations, because the CCR sections 124 and 125. We can add various regulations that you guys have done. But I also had a question on page 13, legislation sponsored by the board and affecting the board. I'm wondering if all of these are sponsored or affect the board, whether you want those included or not. Because it looks to me like some of them that would affect the board aren't really included, like 20 and 38. So perhaps I could either offer my services to help with that, or just kind of take a look at that and make sure that it's really touching the board or sponsored.
Yeah, it's written as of like right now, so yeah, it would be, there is an agenda item to go over the proposed legislation, so they could decide which ones they want to also include in that section, so possible legislation.
One other note on page 14, I'm thinking that perhaps we wanted to insert NCARB section CCR 116 under the regulations.
Is it NCARB?
Yeah.
Insert that section? It's there.
Got it.
It's on the next page.
Oh,
You're just testing us to see for a week.
We were exhausted, but now we're energized again.
Goodbye, I'm energized.
Okay, so we're ready to move on to
Yeah,
section 2.
section 2.
So section 2 has to do with our survey results, and the responses to our surveys are pretty low, but of the responses that we get, a majority of them say they agree or strongly agree and satisfied with our services. So you might notice that the charts are depicted a little differently from our report than landscape, but we tried to show it in the best light of the responses we have received. And these are standard questions.
And if I can add, during the executive committee, we talked about that, and we felt satisfied with the survey results because they're voluntary, and usually survey results are at really low turnout, and they were generally positive. You know, people usually take the time to respond when it's negative or they're upset about something. So
At least it's positive,
Yeah.
if there are only two.
So we were talking about the broader public outreach and more visible presence of the board. Should we also at some point look at the means, the methods we use to reach out for surveying? Currently, it's the link, right? Thinking you listed the 4 means we have.
That's on page 1 of section 2.
Yeah, so just in the future, looking at maybe a strategic session topic, additional methods we can use, internet-based likely.
We were looking at a tool too, and I think sometimes when you are on an internet site, when the survey pops up, you just click it and get it away. But we were looking at possibly having that pop up on our site, yeah, but I know sometimes people are annoyed with those, and they just close them out and don't bother. Okay. In section 3, there's a lot that needs to be filled in on that. It requires me to do a lot of calculations. So mainly it's breaking it down by program component, enforcement, exam, licensing, and administration. So I'll be working on that before this comes back to you again. But the other charts are filled in, and except for the current fiscal year revenue.
Vicki, on page 3 of 6, it's asking how much the board has contributed to Breathe, and it's $328,000. So is that like a contribution whether or not we choose to go with that?
Yes.
So on format or template, I think you mentioned likely that they are just adding a new section or something, will not really change something.
No, I'll just be filling in. Yeah, I'll just be filling in the chart.
Otherwise,
Exactly.
there's lots of work.
Yeah, it's a similar chart as last time. And I believe last time it was like 33% of the budget spent on enforcement, a little less on licensing and admin. But I think the highest percentage was on enforcement. And I think that's what the legislature likes to see, is that was going towards that. And we have
First on section 3.
Yeah.
On page 6, I had a question about the training. It goes into solid, and it says that all of those are free courses, and then the last paragraph, it talks about specialized training, also mandatory courses, and then it says that the average cost spent is $1,227. But that is unclear what you're spending it on, because if solid's free, you're doing all these other mandatory courses that are typically offered online through DCA.
I guess it's the more specialized, like computer type courses that didn't some staff do, was it Dreamweaver or? We could maybe,
So you can massage
Yeah,
that to
so
just
we'll-
say that was spent, yeah, it was
What
spent
it's
on
for.
specialized training.
yeah. Figure that out. Anything else on 3? Or moving forward? Okay, on 4, you'll see the current fiscal year again blank. There is a chart, I think it's on page 9, where they want to know the pass rates, the performance for the ARE for first-time candidates. And Marcus's team has been trying to get that information from NCAR. We thought we had it like about 3 weeks ago, and it wasn't right, and then we went back to them.
We have it now.
So you have it now? So, we can provide it for the CSE, but we haven't been able to, in the past, provide it for ARE, but we did get it from them this time. So we'll be plugging that in as well.
Now, the first numbers for 5.0 is, would it be 17, 18 then? Because we should probably, if there's a distinction between 4.0 and 5.0, I don't know, if you want to make that distinction.
Yeah, there's another table
Yeah.
Oh,
after this one. table
Oh,
8.
you separated it, okay.
Yeah, so that'll have it for 16, 17,
Okay.
for the current fiscal year.
But 16, 17 is it a partial year?
Yes, it's very partial.
The other thing too is there somewhere where you explain the difference? It's because right now I see 4.0, you flip the page and it says it was launched, okay, 5.0. And I know somewhere we talked, oh, there it is.
Yeah,
It's
it's in the
right
next
following,
section.
okay, yeah, good. Because we talked about the fact that it's become more, kind of user-friendly and based on what you actually do.
In alignment with practice.
Right.
Right?
And we wrote that in our president's newsletter, president's letter, everybody read it. Marcus wrote it, but I signed it.
And you'll see on page 12, we added a blurb about the CSE wait time. So that was
Another blurb,
Yeah,
okay,
we'll
good.
put that in there as well.
Wait, where's that?
Back, question 25, last paragraph on it, so this one.
See, this is the one I found that was buried, and so it's good that you have it earlier too.
Yeah.
Because I mean, you really have to find it to,
Yeah.
or look for it to get this part. Okay.
Last time, if you go to page 15, they want information about the CE audits, and if you recall last time, the legislature questioned, they thought we had a high failure rate of the audits, but I think it was, at that time, it was like 18%. And when we compared it to other boards, it really wasn't that high. It was lower than the other boards. So far, our data, it looks like it went from 18 to 16 to 15. I don't know what it's going to be this year, but it might jump up a little bit more. But at least it went down a little bit from when it was before. So I think that's a good sign. Yeah. So any else on section 4? Section 5, there's a lot of data that's not filled in at the end, but overall, our enforcement figures are lower compared to other boards. It's just the nature of the profession and the qualifications that are required for the B license. So we're trying to do our oldest cases, get them completed and closed, but we're having some of the staffing issues. It's kind of gone back up again, but we just have to explain that at the hearing if that becomes an issue. So, this one I think had a lot of the trends, things that we're going to have to massage the wording once we get the data. So they want to know what contributes to any increases or decreases. So once we get that last category of the data, then we'll be able to analyze it and figure out how do we want to portray the answer to give them the information that we're asking. The committee gave any recommendations on these sections. So I think that's pretty much it on that one.
I do, but they're minor technical
Okay,
changes.
we can do that
Talk about later.
Alright, so then section 6 is the public information section. We start to get to be smaller sections, so that's good. But this is more of our public information and our outreach areas. So we tried to highlight our consumer publications that we have and our complaint disclosure policy. Anything on that section? And section 7 is the online practice issue that I mentioned earlier, where we had reached out to Andy and Patricia. What we did was we took our prior answer and we looked at it, and it was kind of dated. Technology changes so much, and it was kind of dated. So before Doug left, we got some input from him, and then we also had our architect consultants review it, and then we had Andy, who's a licensee, review it for landscape, and this is what we came up with. And of any of the sections, this might be the area that we need the professionals, that are facing to give us input. So if you see anything in here that might be misstated or it's not really addressing the answer that you think could be better worded to address their issue, that would be helpful. But all indications that answer that we have there seems to be appropriate. Section 8, it's for workforce development. And we talked about iPal here. I think we also talked about encourage efforts with the experience component. That we didn't see any, there's no data available for the workforce shortages right now. And the economy is strong.
We have workforce shortages because we need people, that kind of
But
workforce
it's
shortage.
the other side of
Just the other side, yeah,
provider side.
exactly. We need more training and more schools, that's what we talked about.
Anything else in section 8? Section 9 is current issues. So, under 9, under 66B, the bulk of the responses we talked about, they want to know if you're not utilizing Breeze, how that's affecting you. And then what you've done to progress forward. So we worked a lot with Jason Piccioni to help with the wording of this section, and it might need some more revisions, but we think it appropriately addresses where we are with the business modernization project. So I think any of the boards that are in at least 3 of the project are in the same scrutiny, and we just want to know how it's impacting. But so far our legacy systems are working fine. We just kind of use them and worked around different things. And if we do the credit card option, that will be helpful. And then the more advanced license lookup online, that would be helpful. It seemed like there was one more stop that whether we were doing the credit card, the online license, and see if there's one other thing, like a short-term fix. There's 3, but it's not coming to mind. And that's basically that section. Then section 10, what you're supposed to do is take the issues that came out of last review, which would have the 2014 response, and then you add a 2018 response. So the issues were the travel restrictions, so we updated that response, and you see a 2018 updated response. There was the pro rata issue. They were concerned about each board's share of pro rata. We updated the response for that. Then there was the Breeze implementation, so we updated that. And then streamlining paths to licensure was issue number 4. So we include information about iPal.
And did you also put the 90-day retest in here also?
Yes.
You might want to consider that. I thought we talked about that we would put it in here also. I don't see it in here right now.
Let's see. I think it was because the issue is more addressed to monitoring our efforts with NCARB, and that really doesn't have.
Page 6, end of first paragraph.
Page 6?
Page 6, end of first paragraph, when we mention the boards and committees.
Okay, no, that's true.
So it's not like really prominently, yeah, because the nature of the question, but it is.
No, that's good, right.
The next issue was the failure rate on CE the audits that I mentioned earlier. So we updated that response. And then issue 6 was information sharing. At the time, we were trying to utilize NCARB's disciplinary database. They were making some changes to it, and NCARB wanted us to provide personal information like social security numbers or birth dates, and we weren't allowed to provide that with an outside entity. But we did work out a way to provide them the information and it contained in their records. The only disadvantage, and I don't even really know that it is a disadvantage, is say another state looks up in that disciplinary database and it's maybe a common name. They might not be certain it's the same person, but they can contact our board to get public records that are allowed under that disciplinary case, and then they can determine if it's the same individual. So we were able to work around it with NCARB, so I think that should be fine. On issue 7, it was the collection of the funds, and so I believe we talked about in this section using credit collection agency.
We're 62% compared to other. Now, when you say, well, but this is paragraph 2 now, of the 2014 response. And you said that at that time, we were collecting 62, and other boards were 37, and now we're 70.
And that might change once
Right.
we do the editing of data. You can't see it, but there's a lot of balloons off to the side of this data where it says updated at the end of fiscal year, but we didn't want to put all that in there and make this really busy looking, but there are a lot of balloons off of the data.
Sure, but the question that I have still remains, which is, what other design professional boards? National? Nationwide? What?
Oh, no, I think it's just contractors and engineers. Normally when we say that, it's the other boards and the other department that are design related.
Huh, so the architects are doing better. Slightly.
And then the last one is just the continued regulation. That's kind of the standard. That's the whole purpose of this since that we use.
Should we exist? No, we like to go away now.
That's a big topic in a lot of parts of the country.
Say that again?
That's a big topic in
Really?
several parts of the country.
Well, there are a lot of other states we notice are consolidating like crazy. I mean,
So why
sometimes
they already are?
I know, like 11 things in one board. You know, and here we are all by ourselves, well, landscape by ourselves. It's pretty,
Yeah, if you look at their acronyms, some of them are really long because they have lots of other professions under one roof. So.
There's a lot of legislatures that are looking to deregulation and wondering why do we need professional licensing. So it's a battle that Doug was working on fighting a lot and
yeah, it's kind of scary, really, because all you need is one big thing to happen. One big tragedy, and then the pendulum will swing back again.
Is the ICAO has any impact to our current regulations as CAF? Not, right?
What section are you
ICAO,
New issues,
Are you on 11?
Section 11, yeah, new
11?
issues.
new issues.
So the ICAO mainly administered by NCAO. So this program does not impact any regulatory change to our board.
Well, we originally, when they started the program, we did, I believe it was a statute change or a regulation change that would allow, which would allow those candidates to take the ARE early. So we did.
So they change all.
Yeah, so we did do that. So
That's after 2014.
In 2015 and 2016.
Yeah.
The big question I always had, and I think it's been resolved with that, is the 7.5 year, 8 year statute. It takes so many years before you're allowed to, before you can get a license. And it's a combination of education and experience. And does the IPAL have the potential for running contrary to that? And suddenly someone's out of school in 4.5 years and they've passed all the ARE and they've done their AXB. Will we allow them to be licensed, or they have to sit wait for a few years?
you know, they should be allowed to because it's also bearing on completion of AXP. So when they graduated, I believe they completed the AXP program at the same time.
They completed everything but that.
Yeah, so it could be substantially less than 8 years.
And that's all right, because that's, right now, people are completing AXP in less than 3 years. So they're getting 5 years credit for their education, their work experience, and then they can take the ARE, and then completion of the AXP, used to be equated to 3 years, but if they can do it in 2.5, 2 and whatever, as long as they complete it as according to the program, then it's okay.
Like I said, I think it's been resolved, but for a while that was the thing I was curious about.
So-
How did that, when you navigate the regulations and the practice act, is that all got cleaned up so there's not a conflict?
So it's a clarification, it's no longer an 8-year requirement to take the CSE.
Isn't it, maybe Marcus?
Yeah, I can
Help explain
elaborate on that. So it's a matter of equivalence. If you worked full-time under the supervision of an architect, you would work effectively 16,000 hours. And then depending on the amount of education and the way the law is written, that a 5-year degree is the equivalent of 10,000 worked hours. So it's all based on what's equivalent to something else. And it uses the 8 years as the standard, but ultimately, to answer Mr. Baker's question, the AXP, the degree, all of that happening essentially concurrently, then you have the equivalent of 8 years training and educational experience. So by the letter of the law, I would think it would match, but I'd have to defer to Carol on that.
So would it be safe to characterize it this way? It used to be consecutive years of things to get 8 years. Now you can overlap them so you can get double dip.
I think there's part of double credit, and I also think now, a long time ago, you had to have a certain period of time before you even counted for it. But now they've got every summer going on, and they've got now the university programs with it. Or in some cases, getting so many hours of education and so many hours of credit all within kind of the same period. So that's all adding up to that.
So that's what I think, Marcus, yes, we need to revise our regulations to accommodate or to responding to the IPAC.
No.
We already did.
But we already asked that statute to be added.
So, in looking at section 11, new issues, the first thing I see is IPAL, but I don't see a problem, it needs a fix.
Yeah, it's not an issue.
Right.
Well, it is.
Yeah, because the question for section 11 is outstanding issues with a board recommendation that could, for action to be taken by the board, DCA, or the legislature to resolve the issues. And IPAL, it looks like it's already been handled, but then we get to written contract, and there's the problem. I don't want written contract to be lost when the committee is just reading, oh, everything's fine. Everything's fine.
Yeah, that's interesting, that's very fine line. So it was not resolved because of new issue, but it was resolved between the last hearing and this hearing.
I think
it would go in a different section.
Yeah.
Okay, it's not a new thing.
when we put this all together, we got input from Doug, obviously, and he felt that those were the two big issues, that the IPAL program, because it's still in its infancy state, and we're monitoring it to see how successful it's going to be, and that the board had approved those participating in it, and California had some schools approved in it. So, not knowing how that program is going to resolve itself, I think that we felt to put it in there. The written contract issue was a proposal that the board came up, they approved a while back for those amendments. He tried a couple times to get an author, and I think he was trying to get it in an omnibus bill, and they weren't willing to put it in there, so he suggested that we include it as a new issue, and then the legislature, if a lot of times they'll either sponsor something and add it in their bill, or they'll give you a recommendation that you can use that statement of support from the legislature when you go find an author. If the board desires, you might want to just take IPAL off of this and just have the written contract.
Not thinking of is, there was an issue, but it's already resolved. The board will take action and modify our regulations to support IPAL. So it may be announced to change the rating, but not a new issue because it was resolved. That's
or current issues.
Yeah,
It's
not
either what the board has done since 2014 and this,
Yeah,
iPad.
It's
We have a
mentioned a
section
lot,
on
yeah,
changes.
it's mentioned a lot in the report.
Yeah.
This isn't the
Okay.
only place, so if you took it out of here, it's still covered elsewhere, but,
I would recommend to remove it.
and then just have written contract.
I think it would be wise to do that because we're starting to witness issues with the high school students
Oh, yeah.
with regards to they're being prepared for licensure, but they're not necessarily being prepared for employment. So it's probably something, a whole other conversation that needs to be had, maybe in our strategic planning meeting or something.
I love where you can speak to that.
Sure. Well, for instance, they're not using the software that most offices use. They're using Rhino and they don't know SketchUp, they don't know Revit, and they come up and they're getting out flashed at interviews because they don't have the credentials that some of the other students who go to schools.
I think some of that's in a process of evolution too. I think with the restructuring of AXP and ARE, and if you look at the modifications made to the NAP criteria, I think some schools are trying to figure out how to retool their programs in order to respond, to the new requirements. And it's a little bit of a struggle maybe. The accreditation visit I went on, you could clearly see evidence where there's specific areas where they're trying to figure out how to interpret what does a comprehensive project really mean.
Right.
What is practice management really, and things like that. And I think they're working on it, but I think they've got a ways to go.
Yeah, there's definitely a breaking link of an employable graduate versus a licensure ready graduate.
What feedback do you get from programs?
Well, I think we need to talk about it, maybe figure out what we can do to help and assist up to the schools. I mean, we're just one firm to see this.
Yeah.
License to
Get feedback, yeah.
So does it come out or stay in?
We might want to take it out if we have some kind of an answer and action.
It's not an unresolved issue like the
Yeah.
section, so I think it doesn't belong here. Maybe it belongs someplace.
The changes made seems nice.
But one of the great byproducts is there's a ton more focus on internships through the XP program now.
That's a real positive.
And that's a real positive because it's really forcing a very structured process of outreach from the schools to the professional environment, getting kids placed and things like that. So that, I think it's been long term. I think we'll look back and see if that's made a huge difference.
The problem that we're backing into though is you've got this structured intern program to get them there, to get their AXP done, but we can't hire them because they don't have the tools set to actually bring them in to do their internship.
But here's what I found with my interns. What they do is they come in, they don't have the right skills, and then we put them to train them while they're interns. So that during the summer or another time, and then by the time they're graduating, they have the skills. We put them on, we teach them Revit, we teach them stuff. So it's not like you're just gonna, if you're working with them as interns, you should be able to train them while they're interning with you.
The conflict is you're interviewing 8 interns. 5 of them you can hire on the spot and they can go to work for you. The iPals can't compete with them, or aren't competing.
But are they at the same level? Because
Yeah,
that's kind of a relatively newer program compared to an intern who's maybe further on in the program.
The right now, I think is that the schools aren't using the same tools that practices, and therefore the iPal students.
That's just dumb.
Yeah.
I mean, I find that.
Is it because they have both?
No.
No, they're
just choose not to.
different functions.
Well, hopefully the schools are getting feedback from the potential firms to hire them.
seems
And
like it's,
they'll start reconsidering the programs they're using. I think that's part of that evolutionary process is gonna have to happen.
there's got to be a little more, a better,
Collaboration.
yeah, collaboration and communication. Just
So I
makes
think
no
that's what
sense.
this has the potential to do, is to get that. The communications, that
Yeah.
has that potential to impact that better than it
Yes,
has been.
absolutely.
For purposes of this section, I think until you flesh out what either the board or the legislature can do about a specific problem, perhaps I would strike it from this section and then maybe agendize it for a future meeting so that you can get the schools in here to talk about what the problem is and why they're doing what they are.
And you also, I think, need more feedback from other firms and
Yeah.
what they're experiencing or seeing.
Yes.
So I can also accept if you assign to the professional qualification committee to talk about this.
Okay, that's good.
Okay. So for now, we'll just leave the written contract in here. As I said earlier, this was a proposal that went to the board and we approved it, but we couldn't get it sponsored in that bill. But Landscape hadn't reviewed this language, so what Brianna and I did was we took the proposed amendments that applied for the architects and we incorporated it into the landscape provision. And I believe it's on their agenda for the July meeting. So if the LETC committee members agree with the proposal that we put in on their agenda, then it will also be included in their draft report. So I think we kind of assumed that it would probably go that route. So in the landscape report, we added that as a new issue with their wording as well. But that might change depending upon the July meeting. They might make some edits.
Just Patricia, if you already read it, have a quick comment, go on here. Otherwise, you will be in the next meeting.
Yeah, it's just interesting to listen to your discussion, particularly about education, because we have the same issues as well. So, as far as what goes into the sunset report, we'd like to be consistent with our.
Yeah, and we try to mirror our responses with theirs and vice versa. So some of it obviously can't be the same, but for the most part, a lot of it is the same. So if we make an edit in ours, then sometimes we have to check theirs to make sure that that same edit has to be made in theirs as well. And then section 12 is just the attachments that go with the report. Attachment A is the board member administrative procedure manual, and that's kind of a given. The legislature wants to see that, and we do have one for the board members. It was last updated, I believe, in 2012 when the board worked out the committee appointments process and the term of the members on there. And the LATC, I don't believe they formally reviewed and approved their administrative manual. So Brianna's staff is comparing, we had a draft of the LATC manual and they're comparing it with the boards, and that's going to go to the committee as well in July, because I think it's really important that the LATC can also say they have this manual. So we hope to get that approved by the committee in July as well. It does need some edits to it. A recent legal thing that came up was whether or not board and committee members should be paid per diem if they're working for a public entity. So I think we need to revise the wording in the board members manual eventually. But for the LATC, we're going to try and incorporate that proposed language into their manual. So we might have it come back to the board in September, so you guys can reapprove your manual with that edit as well. So that's basically for ours. On landscapes, it's a lot of the same information. Obviously, they have different issues. For example, they've been really focusing on the board's directive a while back to expand their pathways, because the architects have a pathway for experience only and related degrees. And so they've been really focusing on that, and they had some proposed regulations that involve that. But they don't have an internship program, as I mentioned to the public earlier, that they don't have an internship program. So they need to work out some more details on that. But for the most part, a lot of what's in our report is in theirs. I'm trying to think of another example, maybe Brianna can help me, of different issues affected by the LETC that aren't by the committee, besides your expanded pathways.
The main one.
Huh?
That's our main one.
Yeah. The reciprocity requirements, they align those with their initial requirements to be in line with ours.
Some surveys that we reported from between 2014 to now. Seems like a little bit, but as far as the new
It's basically the same.
Yeah.
Oh, another issue that came up with the boards currently under review was why don't they have updated disciplinary guidelines? So, yours have been coming around several times, the landscapes have been coming around several times. So that'll be good to say in the report that we have these updated guidelines and now that we're just going through the regulatory process.
I have a question. Who determines how often the LHTC meets?
It's in the statute that they meet 3 times a year, but they
So that's
normally meet
the max.
Well, they normally meet 4, but this year I believe it's 3. They had a scheduling conflict. They were supposed to have a meeting in February, but there was a scheduling conflict, and then they had to pick a new date, and it ended up being in May. But according to the statute, it's 3 times a year.
It just seemed like a long time to go from November through May.
Yeah, it was supposed to be in
And it seemed
November.
to make it look really inefficient to get anything done if you take that long to meet.
Yeah, they, like I said, they were supposed to meet in February.
Can I comment on that?
Sure. Yes.
So, there was a request that we put our meetings on Fridays so that, it's easier for the public to attend, and that's really been difficult, to schedule things on Fridays. So we might want to revisit putting it back on a Wednesday or Thursday, but that was the issue.
What public are they talking about exactly?
The general public or professionals.
They
Why
just
would
recommend.
Friday be easier than any other day? I mean, I just don't understand the Friday part.
Saturday would be good.
Well, originally they did say
They
Saturday.
really suggested that?
Yeah,
They must have a different public than we do.
So, obviously,
they didn't want to miss any work, so they wanted it to be Saturday.
But who's they? I mean, I'm just curious, who comes?
They were professionals.
Well, basically.
Yeah? Oh, I see. I see.
So, but we are meeting the mandate every 3 times, but we normally try to meet 4.
Evening
So was there a particular area in landscape that you want to go through or concern that you might have?
Was there anything we needed to do to address the gentleman's concerns? with the
That'll be later, yeah. That'll
That's,
be later.
LATC report.
Okay, are you done with your report? I mean,
Well,
or
unless
do
you want to go through in more detail with landscape, but for the most part,
Probably not.
Unless
The
you have-
committee will be.
Madam President, can I just ask a question?
Yes.
Vicky? Where are you with you made reference to, amending the business professions code to change the terms of a legal contract. What's the status of that?
you mean that under the new issues section?
Yeah. Is this just like a pipe dream at this stage, or is there actually something moving forward that?
No, Doug tried to get an offer to put it in a bill, but I think he was trying to get it in an omnibus bill, and you can't have anything controversial in an omnibus bill, and so I think he tried twice, and it wasn't approved to go in the bill. So he just thought, then put it as a new issue. If the legislature wants to add it to their bill when they do our sunrise, I guess it's called, or extension of our sunset date, then it'll be in that bill. If not, then once you have them endorsing it and giving a recommendation that you go forward with it, it's easier than to get it sponsored.
So right now, it's an idea of looking for someone to pick it up.
There was a provision in it, I don't know if you recall, that it had to do with adding the contact information of the board if a consumer had a complaint or an issue. And we pulled that part out. There was some discussion at the board meeting to pull that out and have it go back to the REC so they could come up with another avenue to get that word out to consumers. But the board thought it might be a better method or vehicle to get that out other than in a written contract. I think some of the concern was in the public entity contracts, the public schools and stuff. Those contracts are pretty much dictated what can go in there and what can't, and there might have been some issues with that. So that was pulled out of that proposal, but the rest of it is basically what the board approved before.
Okay, Jay.
All right, so, great. So we do need to, possibly take action, right, on this?
I'll defer to Tara. I don't think that you do because it's gonna come back in September.
Okay, right, and, clearly more data needs to be added, and, I've got a minor tweaks and bulk and almost and stuff, so no action needs to be taken.
Basically, it's to, incorporate your input into this, and then it will apply if there's anything that went into ours that'll also go into landscapes, and then it'll go to them in July, and then it'll come back to the board in September.
Sounds good. Okay, great. So the next item is tab J on in your packet, which is proposed legislation, and there's a series of them that Mel, like 10 of them. Mel, you're going to take us through it really quick, aren't you?
Well, actually, yes, in the interest of time, I know that we have places to be in the next hour, so we'll make sure that we expedite the legislation.
And you'll let us know if we need to take any action. Okay?
I will. In fact, this information is being provided as a brief recap. I assume we've all reviewed the bills, but no action is required. It's just being presented as
information.
Information use. That's right. And as you noted, yes, we do have more bills than usual. The department is tracking several bills, but these are being brought forth to your attention as bills that are of interest to the board. So the first bill is Assembly Bill 767. This bill establishes what's called the Master Small Business License Center within the Governor's Office of Business and Economic Development. It would develop and administer an internet-based platform that allows a business to electronically submit a master application that includes 2 or more permits. And that also includes the submittal of required fees. And so from the state agency's perspective, this would, we would receive, or any state agency would receive completed forms and the payment of fees while retaining full authority for the approval or disapproval of the application. Okay. About its fiscal effect, really the department has given an estimate of approximately $18.7 million in administrative and system modifications. So that would be the fiscal cost. Also on an annual basis, it would require $240,000 to the department as well. So that's really the heart of this bill. Several boards have expressed concern about it, but none have taken a position at this time.
So how would it apply to us? How would we use this?
Sure. Well, how would we use it? That's a good question. I mean, we have online platforms that we're looking at the moment to implement certain things that that we deem important. And so we'll have to take a deeper dive, I would say, to really get a sense of if indeed we would need to use it, or given what we're working with, reuse or just modernization, if there's overlap there, we'll have to just have a closer look. So I just wanted to bring that to your attention. Okay. All right. So the next bill, Assembly Bill 2138. This is a bill concerning alleviating barriers to occupational licensing. So all too often, qualified people are denied occupational licenses, and or they have them revoked or suspended on the basis of a prior conviction. This bill would limit a board's discretion to prohibit a license denial or suspension, or to revoke a license for offenses older than 5 years, with the exception of violent felonies. And that's currently in statute. The details are specified in attachment 2 of your packet. Fiscally, according to the Assembly Committee of Appropriations, the annual special fund costs for pre-licensure and enforcement related costs range from minor to absorbable, minor and absorbable to significant. And that would apply to various boards within the Department of Consumer Affairs. It's currently opposed by several boards, including engineers and contractors. But again, the concept is designed to alleviate the barriers to occupational licensing for those with prior criminal convictions. Any questions about that?
This one, I think, we should just monitor. The department and the legislature have been asking for data, how it might affect the programs. When we looked into our records, we had one case where it might have affected it if it was in effect. And landscape, I believe, didn't have any. So I don't know that we're in a position to take a position on it, but I think we should monitor the amendments to it, what's going on. I know there's been some meetings where they've asked for suggested amendments, and so the boards that have been enforcing it have been working on some amendments. So I think just monitoring it, and then maybe at a later date. And I was going to ask Tara this, if this would be permissible. When the new executive officer starts, could they work with the board president to come up with a position for the board, or does it need a full board action on it? Should they want to go on record as opposing or supporting this bill?
So I'm looking up your administrative manual right now because it should give us an idea of.
I believe there's a provision in there that says that the EO can work with the president and the vice president. But I didn't know if that follows protocol when you don't have a full board vote on a bill.
I mean, there's working with, and then there's expressing a particular position.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that's the real concern is if the board is taking a position, but the members didn't have an ability to weigh in on that position. Is there authority in your administrative manual for the board president and the EO to do that? This is, on 2138, it's a real debate over public safety versus breaking down barriers to licensure, because the prohibition from considering convictions more than 5 years old for most purposes, including some sexual assault offenses. And then you have these licensees who you can no longer discipline or deny licensure who've committed these crimes, going into people's houses, particularly for the healing arts licensees. That's the real concern with this bill. So if it reaches a point that you feel it necessary to take a position on the board, or take a position on the bill, this might be one of those that is a good idea to do, because this board, as all boards, has a mandate from the legislature to protect the public. So if there's a consideration there that it's walking down the wrong path, I would assume that this board would be in support of protecting the public in whatever manner that looks like. But I would prefer to find the exact language so that we're all comfortable about what the board president and incoming EO can do on legislation. The point being that legislation moves pretty quickly, and for board efficiency, sometimes these decisions have to be made outside of the meeting.
Well, in the past, we've never done that. And if we've had something that was urgent, we've done like a conference call or something like that, so the board has a chance to weigh in. Doesn't mean you can't do all the analysis in that, but I think in the past, the board's always at least had an opportunity to weigh in, and that the position isn't totally on the shoulders of the president and the EO. This and like several and some a few years ago, it seemed like they all came from issues in the arts areas, doctor things. So it's kind of it has less application to our profession than it does to someone providing home health services, for instance.
Well, I don't know, because I don't know how many architects are meeting in people's homes to do residential renovations. And to the extent that newly licensed architect has convictions for bad conduct, is that up public?
Is there actual data that supports the premise behind these? Because what they're saying is if someone's been accused but not convicted, or their conviction's been vacated, or they've been pardoned, or they've done their restitution and paid their price to society, should this recidivism rate is much higher if they don't have a pathway to get out of illegal behavior. So is there data behind this that says that if we did this differently, it would actually produce a different result, or is this just
I don't
wish
know.
prayer?
I think the bill's authors would need to explain that. Yeah. And I don't know that they're doing that very effectively. I know they're meeting with board EOs and presidents, but the overarching issue, as Mel was saying, is barriers to licensure. So I think a lot of this stuff came out of the Little People report. They're going to ban the box for reporting convictions, and that's all you guys have. You don't have fingerprinting. So unless somebody reports that they were convicted of a crime, you won't have any idea.
If they're banning the box, can you not even ask? What do you mean? Do they overlap with the laws?
This would prohibit a licensure board or bureau from asking the question, so the box would go around. Yeah.
It's tough because there's all different types of convictions. There's things that should be convicted for that are now legal. They're not.
What do you mean by that, Terry? Do you mean the box just in general asking the conviction question?
Like on your application for
Completely.
Yeah, you would not be able to ask that question anymore on an application for licensure.
And right now, that's how we find out about some of them, because we don't require fingerprinting.
At some point, are we going to require fingerprinting?
Well, it would either be up to the board to initiate the requirement or propose legislation, or for the legislature to force it upon.
You could add that to the list of things that go in a legal contract.
What?
Well, I'm just saying.
Well, there is a strat objective to reassess it, because I believe the requirement to have fingerprinting came before the board twice before, and it was voted not to require it. We're one of the few boards that don't. So I thought last year it might have been an issue presented by the legislature that we do require it, but it wasn't. And it doesn't sound like it's going to be this year either. It's not like their focus. There are questions in the sunset report that ask if you have a fingerprinting requirement. But it is a strategic plan objective. The Regulatory Enforcement Committee is supposed to be working on it this summer or early fall, and then hopefully the recommendation will come to the board.
So when we have that discussion, can we have information of why it wasn't?
Why the board twice? So
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah, that's part of the analysis. Yeah, they had reasons why they were going against it.
Okay, so I found the legislation policy, and it does state that the board delegates to the executive officer the authority to take action on legislation, and that would include submitting a support or opposed letter. That would change the Architects Practice Act, which impacts a previously established board policy or affects the public's health, safety, or welfare. Prior to taking a position on legislation, the executive officer shall consult with the board president.
So does this bill though really affect a section in the Practice Act? I don't think it does.
No, and I would say that if I'm trying to be creative here and I don't know what the board intended by this wonky language, it says which impacts a previously established board policy or affects the public's health, safety, or welfare. So, you know, if you want to fudge this and take a position on 2138, I would rely on affects the public health, safety, or welfare.
Can we just take a position on it?
Well, what?
We don't have enough.
Yeah, I need more information or something.
But nobody knows.
So my suggestion would be that we continue to monitor it. It might fail, who knows, or it might get amended. I know they've been working on proposals. And then if it comes down to it where we feel we need a position, then the EO can work with the president.
Okay, we're moving on to Assembly Bill 2182. This bill requires that the department establish what's called an internet web portal that's linked to the Consumer Information Center. It will be linked to its webpage, and it will contain links to the personal data privacy policies of online platforms, including social media. It would also require the department to determine the threshold for the number of annual users or visitors to an online platform that will have the privacy policy linked through that portal. So really the purpose of this bill is to protect the personal information of California consumers that's in the hands of big tech. Right now we don't have the ability to really engage and enforce and regulate big tech right now. So this is a response to that inability to do so, which is a requirement that the DCA establish an internet web portal that will contain links to the personal data privacy policies of online platforms. All right, you got that? This bill is strongly opposed, but no opposition has been reported from the department.
It's outside. The opposition is outside.
Oh, I see.
Right, excuse me. There's no opposition from boards within this department.
Is that interesting because boards aren't actually affected by this? It's just
Well,
CA has to establish.
well, the opposition is outside of the department from special interests, and I would assume that that's precisely why, because it doesn't necessarily
Right, I'm sure it's
affect individual boards.
Yeah.
But weren't we supposed to protect consumers?
We are. Indeed.
Yeah.
Well, that's your job.
So,
Any other comments? So are we just watching this?
I would recommend we follow along something similar to Vicky's suggestion.
Okay.
Just watching and seeing how it develops. All right. Assembly Bill 2483. This bill expands the, well, I should say first that the purpose of it is to ensure that board members, DCA board members, are not responsible or actually personally liable is the term in the event they are sued in an antitrust matter that's related to their board service. So what it does is this bill expands the Government Claims Act to require a public entity to pay a judgment or settlement for the damage antitrust awards against a member of a regulatory board within the department for an act or omission occurring within the scope of the member's official capacity as a member of a regulatory board.
So if we're sued, I guess DCA will cover us to 3 times the damage or something, treble damage.
Well, it would be the board. We would be responsible.
That agency.
So it's kind of like D&O insurance in a way, right? Directors and officers insurance. That's what it sounds like to me.
Well,
And we don't have D&O insurance, do we? Or do we?
I don't know about that, but this bill, makes it so that you're not personally liable. The agency covers any settlement or judgment, but it's also, coming out of, an AG opinion that, was requested following the North Carolina case. Yeah, so when we're talking about antitrust, we're talking about the North Carolina case. So to the extent that you, adopted a regulation and it went through the process and somebody found it to be an antitrust style regulation and they took it to court and won, you as individual members would not be on the hook for that. And the AG's memo said that this type of antitrust indemnification provision would be necessary to protect the members.
Yeah, why wouldn't we support it?
There are some boards that
Well,
have.
Yeah, I was gonna say, there are boards within the department that have offered a position of support for this legislation, including contractors and engineers.
I have no idea why we would.
Yeah.
So can we take a motion? I mean, you need a motion.
You may.
So with
Second?
Second.
Okay, wait, a motion and a second?
I can
Support.
do
Okay, great, thank
John Baker.
Aye.
Denise Campbell. What is it?
you. You just have to be.
Tian Ping, aye. Pascal Gutierrez.
Yes.
Sylvia Khan.
Aye.
Ebony Lewis.
Aye.
Matthew McGinnis.
Aye.
Robert Human.
Aye.
Melissa Epson. Barry Williams.
Aye.
Okay, so we have support of AB 2483.
Glad to come up with a solution.
Yeah. It was
I'm John.
John Hibbett. Hibbett.
Thing one thing two.
I can say that. All right, now.
All right, so next we have Senate Bill 721. Now this bill is in response to the deadly 2015 Berkeley balcony collapse, if you remember that. It creates standards for inspecting exterior elevated elements, such as balconies and decks of multi-family buildings. It also requires a person that is licensed to perform inspections by the department, either a contractor, an engineer, an architect, or a structural pest control operator, to inspect these exterior elevated elements of all buildings more than 6 feet above ground level in a building that contains 3 or more multifamily dwelling units. Another requirement is for these inspections to be documented with county recorders every 5 years. All right, so that's the heart of the bill.
So I think it's very uninformed bill.
An uninformed bill?
Uninformed bill. First of all, the deck building fails. It's most likely because lack of maintenance and lack of upkeep. And the two is when that inspection should take place. Because if during the construction, that responsibility resides with building permit, the inspection. It's the after construction, who is responsible, which architect, which building inspector.
They don't make clear. All they're saying is every 5 years, you have to have an inspector. Somebody that's licensed.
Who calls? The owner?
So the question is, who is responsible for hiring an individual to perform these inspections? Good question. I would have to look through the language of this bill in detail and see if it's specified, but I think that will find out.
Any license.
I think until build more mature, we're probably going to stay away from it.
Yeah, it's kind of one of those single issue bills, you know?
Yeah. This is a whole bunch of can of worms.
Yeah.
The bill has received support from the CSLD, so that's registered.
That's been.
Is it to the wood?
So the architect.
I don't know if you want to inspect it.
What do you get paid for 1 hour?
Yeah.
I don't know.
Yeah,
Anyway,
we're both
Yeah, right.
That's the concern I thought, was like, who would really want to do those inspections? You'd be charging, I would imagine, a lot to be liable for this.
Well, unless you do destructive testing, you're not gonna see much.
Right,
So
right.
I would have a motion to wait and see.
Yeah, wait and see.
How do I do that? Wait and see?
You don't have to wait and see, you just don't do anything, right?
Just don't wait.
Yeah.
Don't take any position.
No position, just one.
It's gonna create
Just one.
So there's another political statement that was chair of the Senate Business and Professions Committee is the author of this bill. I just want to point that out.
Maybe we need to see these on stalking.
Put it in the ADA, right?
Yeah.
He's really bad.
So was there a sense that there was some sort of flaw or an inability to assign blame associated with the? I mean, what stimulated this? Because were they unable to? Did they find a loophole in the law where someone got away with allowing this to happen? Is that what happened? Do you think?
I have no idea. I'm sure this probably came out of the enforcement against the companies involved with the collapse. So I'm pretty sure that CSLB had enforcement actions against them, and whatever they found in the investigation of that situation, this legislation most likely came out of and was trying to address. I don't know the ins and outs of it because I don't do CSLB enforcement stuff.
That is really part of the homeless responsibility and liability. An architect cannot go there to enforce that. And in general sense, they can expose the wires. So you need to ask an electrician, inspect every apartment every 5 years, every 2 years. No, they simply cannot through external enforcement upon this kind of practice, right?
Are you interested in doing a concern letter that takes no position and just raises the issue for the author's consideration?
I think if we can contribute something to the process by doing something, that might not be a bad idea.
How are you volunteering over there?
No, I'm not volunteering to do that.
No, then you are assigned
raised your
to do
hand.
that.
I raised my hand because I wanted to say something.
Oh.
This is a feel-good
Mark's
piece.
volunteer by saying
This is a feel-good piece of legislation. That there's a problem, and they're trying to find a solution to it. I'm a little bit privy to what went on there because my previous cohort, Barry Williams, worked with CSLB on the inspection.
I get information.
The other Barry Williams. And I got to see some of the report, I got to see some of the photographs, got to see the problems. Problems that happened were water intrusion that started with a contractor using the wrong material and didn't waterproof it during a rainstorm, and they just encapsulated it. And it sat there and rotted for 5 years. That's what happened. There are issues that brought it about that made it worse. You can't have a vent opening over a doorway or a window because if there's a fire, it could get up in the enclosed space and burn it. But that balcony needed to have vents to be able to vent out moisture that might have helped it. All the inspections in the world wouldn't have seen anything unless you destroy it.
Right.
Now, this piece of legislation needs to designate who is going to be responsible for doing it, initiating, I should say, the property owner or whatever, and needs to put responsibility on somebody, not an architect or an engineer, to come out and do it, or just I drive by and go, it's time for me to inspect your patio there, let me come and do that for you. It feels good, but it doesn't solve the problem.
Right.
It might cause a bigger problem, exactly right.
What you're saying is make it very clear that the state's assemblymen and women are responsible for inspect these things.
I guess so, because they can call for whenever it's going to happen. Who's going to hold a property owner responsible if they don't do it every 6 years?
And to be serious, I just want, because I involved in industry forensics for 4 years, even you ask most of architects to inspect, they don't have the tool to detect.
Exactly.
So their inspector will not be, the careful architect will reject, they will not inspect. If the inexperienced architect will not provide that assurance because they don't have the tool and knowledge. So that will not work.
Yeah, it's a solution with a problem, search of a problem.
I'm wondering if you could write sort of an informed letter with the points that you just made.
Yeah.
And just say, we're not for or against it, but here are some facts that may
Or concerns.
I think from the standpoint of consumer protection, I think that's a service that we should provide. Because if this goes through and they try to do this, what it'll do is it'll give building owners and consumers that are using these buildings a false sense of security.
Yeah.
And that's not a service.
And then instead of takes time and money to make sure that buildings are secure, they can play a game. Every 5 years, hire some cheap person to inspect. They don't even have to worry about the maintenance. So it's really, the bill does the harm far greater than the benefit.
So how do you want to handle it?
Well, I think based on what I'm hearing, it sounds like we decided to just take a watch position, not to really offer a position of support or opposition, but to watch the bill, correct?
Oh, I like Carol's recommendation.
Well, I was going to say we could watch it, but then also submit a letter or author a letter outlining these incentives.
Yeah, and I'd like to recommend that our consultant architects do that, because he has really very specific understanding of the situation.
Well, I think also, I think the concern is based on the fact that this is a bill that is assumed, or this is a bill that's going back and looking at something that's already reviewed and approved by an agency. The detailing of that balcony was approved by the building department. The construction of that balcony was reviewed and approved by an inspector. So it should have been done right then and there. It should have been taken care of. And now we're creating a bill over here to go back and see the things
And it's like ongoing though, just to make sure it's still safe.
But you can't do that every single time you look at it. You would never discover that the waterproofing was incorrect.
You're the terror part to look at.
It actually sounds like we opposed it.
Yeah.
Yeah, almost like oppose it.
I think we should oppose it.
Maybe
Then, right,
oppose
can
it.
we also explain why?
yeah, we probably
why?
should
She doesn't want us to oppose it because politics.
Who cares?
I'm just, let's look at all the options. You can oppose unless amended. You can oppose, just say this is a terrible idea and explain all the reasons why. You can take no position and explain all the concerns. I don't think you're doing anything more than that. There is no support to be had here. Or unless it's support if amended, but right now we don't know what amendments.
Sounds like oppose with a letter, a detailed letter to follow would be a good idea.
I motion to oppose it.
No.
I can, I motion to oppose it. I won't talk about it.
I second the motion.
So,
Motion in a second.
You guys.
I need a second.
Just a sec.
Should I try to,
And this is to
It's okay.
oppose.
You can vote down.
But your motion includes authoring a letter.
Yes.
With the letter.
I heard him thinking that, he didn't actually say it.
I think you should also authorize the EO and or board president to work with the author's office.
yeah, can we,
Work with them.
constructive, can we?
Yes.
Yeah, because if you can get in the door and have a constructive conversation about this, then, I think that's beneficial. I second.
I have to accept the friendly amendment.
No, you don't, because Ebony is the second.
Karen, you will help the next time.
I'll second.
Sorry, Robert, wherever you
I'm
are.
friendly. Second.
So, call for vote. John Baker.
Aye.
Denise Campbell absent. Xian Bin, aye. Pascal Dupuis.
Yes.
Sylvia Pong. Mrs. Ebony Moon.
Aye.
Reverend McGinnis. Robert Pearman. And Neil Serrano absent. Barry amendments?
Aye.
Okay. So we have a motion that passed, that we're gonna take no position.
Working with the author.
Okay.
No, not going to approve the bill, we're opposing it, and we're going to write a letter explaining why it's a bad idea.
But they're gonna hold a meeting too.
Right, yeah, so
To
what
work with
I
authors.
understand is, it's a motion to oppose the bill, with submitting a letter of concerns and the board's position, and authorizing the executive officer and board president to work with the author's office to amend the bill.
Do we want to
Or-
amend? I see that's.
Yeah. And it's just,
And then the bill.
Not amend.
Or we're gonna
Nothing to amend.
Is that part just a discussion?
I don't know what they would amend it into. They could amend it into something entirely different, I suppose.
well, notice that this, bill deals with two different areas of the law. I think it affects the Contractors Practice Act as well as the Civil Code, specifically directed at common interest developments. So it's requiring the board of directors of the CID to hire this inspection. So it's also kind of aimed at CIDs, and they're going to be on the hook financially if they don't start doing these reports or hiring somebody to do it. My point being that, there are a couple different angles here. Perhaps, one of these ideas is good and another one isn't. I don't know, but to the extent you want the EO and board president or whomever to work with the author's office to discuss the bill. That's one thing, or if you want no amendments, or to just drop the bill, perhaps there's no discussion.
Well, okay, so
But they will
I
not.
guess one of the things that could come out of this if we discuss with the author is what would understanding what the real issue is, what kind of bill would help actually address the issue? And we know the issue is a combination of construction inspection that probably didn't catch it when it was built wrong, and how do you mandate ongoing deferred maintenance on buildings so that things don't start to fall apart and fall down? And so maybe if you focus on those two issues, maybe there is a way to create a process that makes some sense.
Is that logic we're opposed because we don't see architects can play a role effectively here, so we ask the bill to remove the architect as a profession from the bill.
No, because I think we're still putting consumers at risk.
It's a bad idea. You can't inspect it. We've all said you can't inspect it without tearing it apart. What's the point? I mean, it's a bad idea.
What the inspector can do it, if owner can pay for it. Well,
Why would you require an owner to pay for this every 6 years to tear his balcony apart? I mean, this is just dumb. I mean, I don't know why we're stepping around it. I think we should just oppose it with a letter. I mean, is there anything that's going to work in this? There's nothing that works in this. Forgive me for being so blunt.
I mean, the only amendment that we made is to change the bill to an inspection of water intrusion. Because over time, you could have water intrusion just by wear and tear on the building. And possibly that could be detected. Leaky roofs, leaky balconies, leaky.
You create a whole industry on that one.
Yeah, you can create a whole industry out of that. But buildings do get old, and so how do you keep them from being falling into disrepair? Which would then, in a sense, that will protect the consumer. Yeah. But that's creating a whole different bill.
But how do we protect the consumer? Yeah, how do we protect the consumer if there's people out there creating a whole industry out there taking advantage of documents?
Yeah, just documents.
My suggestion on
like water intrusion, everything.
my suggestion on removing architect is not willing to put the public at risk. Is that the willing professions like engineers and waterproof contractors, they do have the tool, have the training, and then people hire them to do this kind of work in a constructive way. Major developers hired to go to the building, make sure the waterproof is intact. So there are professions can do that, but not very practical. Just like you said, I don't think every owner can afford that.
Well, it's
Listen,
not average owner.
I think here's where we are, and I don't think you're wrong. I think what we're suggesting is that tell them we're opposed to the way this bill is, outline what the issues are, and have a conversation and offer some assistance, because maybe there's a different bill or a different process that could creatively be developed that might begin to address, poor long-term maintenance on buildings. And I don't know what that is. I don't think we're prepared to solve it here. But maybe there's an answer. It's not obvious, but maybe there's a way to write something that would work. So maybe that's
So the current motion is good because to amend, there's no limit.
Right, and I think it is important to allow somebody to communicate with the auditor's office in case there's a path forward that satisfies this board's concerns. And, because that meeting may or may not actually occur, or just at least giving the authority. Yeah.
We certainly appreciate what they're trying to do, but they're just going about it all wrong.
Right. Or we want to say it.
Okay.
I like that.
Are we up
So
to
do
number
we-
5 now?
Do you have any idea what we just said?
Yeah, so do we do that with
You sure?
oppose and work with the author?
No.
Yes.
Yeah.
I
Amend.
thought we weren't even gonna take a position.
We just did.
We just voted.
Did we?
Yeah.
Okay, you say something.
Okay.
Moving on.
Yes, all right, so we're halfway through the bills.
Come on, let's move it.
Can you pick it up a
Whenever we
little bit,
get
please?
out here.
Well, the next bills, Senate Bill 984. This bill requires the composition of each appointed state board and commission to have a specified minimum number of women board members or commissioners based on the total number of board members or commissioners on that board. So, for example, our board has 10 boards. If the number of board members or commissioners is 6 or more, then the state board or commission shall have a minimum of 40% women, so 4 out of 10, as board members or commissioners.
Yeah.
So that is
So we're good.
right. So that is an example of one of the provisions that would be required for a board our size.
Kara, I want this bill also have to be examined very carefully. I have been dealing with transgender issues big time. So I don't think that the principle here reflects that gender neutral policy that the California is moving towards. Okay, so be very careful.
Well, actually, the bill does specify that the gender of the applicant or appointed board member or commissioner shall be determined by their self-identification.
No, that's not a gender neutral. They
Gender
do not,
neutral, it's like
yeah,
they
identify their woman on
identify.
it.
Well, you mentioned transgender. They may, for example, if one is appointed to the board, he or she may choose his or her gender.
So it's a clear state law. I'm surprised this bill seems not in sync with the state law.
The bill's gonna bring a lawsuit. It's discriminatory.
Oh, okay.
It's flat out, there's discrimination laws against this stuff.
We put so much
Well,
effort.
that's a concern.
Okay.
That I agree exists, right? Because if we have,
I know I can't do it in my business. I'll
well,
get sued.
well,
So how can the state do it? It's against the law.
Probably gets a lot of you to write it down.
Just against, we put
Well-
so
But
much.
they got rid of those.
let me see. Well, I also that no boards actually support it
Oh, okay.
or oppose it. So
Everybody's silent.
Everybody's
There-
afraid to touch it.
Yeah.
there is support, though, outside of the department from local rights advocacy
Sure.
and organizations that are for advancement of women.
It's like bringing it back.
I think that may guide your
Maybe we'll just watch this one.
Just watch or take no position.
I
Okay.
recommend. Okay.
Any questions on Senate Bill 984?
Nope.
Okay,
Move on.
moving on to Senate Bill 1137. This bill seeks to ease occupational licensing barriers for California veterans and military spouses. All right. So specifically, this bill would require CalVet and the department, in consultation with each other, to take appropriate steps to increase awareness regarding professional licensing benefits available to veterans and their spouses. It also provides that the awareness efforts shall include, but not be limited to, posting information and resources on each department's respective internet or website. That's A. B. It also provides that it shall include information about these benefits and any communications that these agencies have with veterans when it is appropriate. All right. No boards actually support or oppose the bill, but we do, as a board, already engage in communications, targeted communications with veterans and their spouses.
And you've seen the posters that we've.
Well, this is substantially different than the bill we saw a few years ago, which was to allow preferential treatment for licensed reciprocity and things like that, which really didn't work.
Right. Yeah, that's not this. This is simply creating more outreach and connections with CalVet through the Department of Consumer Affairs, which is something we're already engaged in. So,
That's good. Right.
So again, we don't have to take a position of support or opposition. It's completely up to the board. We can watch it. We can do what we want.
Well, if we're already doing an outreach, all it's doing is bringing more attention to our board and saying that we're vet friendly. So I don't see why we wouldn't.
Is that a motion?
I move to support
I'll second.
SB 1137.
Okay, we have
What is the
motion
motion?
and second. 1137.
1137.
John Baker. Denise Campos absent. Calvin I. Pascal Gutierrez.
Yes.
Sylvia Pong.
Aye.
Ebony Luis.
Aye.
Matthew McGinnis. Robert Gilman. Neil Tasserano. Absent. Barry Williams.
Okay, motion passes.
Okay.
Who's the second?
Matt.
Okay. We are almost done. Senate Bill 1298. This bill is actually, it has failed, so it is a dead bill, pursuant to the, Rule 61B8. We'll pass that one in the interest of time. Senate Bill 1465, and again, this is for informational purposes only. This bill concerns CSLB. It would require a licensed contractor to report to the Contractor State License Board any civil action or administrative action that meets specified criteria, resulting in a final judgment, executed settlement agreement, or final arbitration award of $1 million or greater within 90 days as specified. So this is supported by CSLB. No other boards have taken a position because it's their bill.
It's internal.
Right, it's more internal. So we just wanted to bring that to your attention as well. And then the final bill, Senate Bill 1480. This bill amends the General Business and Professions, Section 328, which pertains to our board. What it does is you may be aware that there are complaint prioritization guidelines that exist for boards to utilize in prioritizing their respective complaints and investigative workloads. Right? So this bill would require an amendment to that section, and that amendment is on or before July 1st of 2019, the director shall amend the guidelines implemented pursuant to subdivision A to include the category of allegations of serious harm to a minor under the urgent or highest priority level. So it's relocating that particular category to the urgent or highest priority level. So that's the amendment, and it would pertain to our board. FYI.
These aren't convictions, these are complaints or allegations.
No, these are, these are our guidelines, specifically the guidelines for how we decide to engage with our enforcement efforts. So complaint and investigative boards. Right?
Is this for,
Does that make sense?
is this for child labor laws or more specifically sexual harassment kind of stuff?
Well, it doesn't specify. It's any allegation that involves serious harm to a minor. Right, so the amendment would move that category.
So if our enforcement agents get a complaint against an architect that has nothing to do with architecture, but it's a complaint that the individual is, done something to harm a child, how do you process that complaint? Doesn't have anything to do with architecture.
It depends whether it's jurisdictional or not, so you would determine based on your investigation if it fell within any of our violations of the act. But I think what this bill does is it just rises that complaint to be a priority amongst all your other complaints. So it would be treated the same, it just gives the priority.
Well, I guess my question, I see how it has the application in a lot of professions, but is our enforcement staff prepared to investigate those kinds of complaints? What would you do?
I mean, odds are we aren't going to get one, but it is a general provision of the Business and Professions Code that applies to the other boards and us. So, odds are we probably won't get one that would fall into that category. It's religious things. Yeah.
Good luck with that one, Bob.
Anybody want to take
On that,
It looks like we're just going to watch that.
What are others, what other position, or what are other boards taking
Actually, no boards currently oppose the bill. Affected boards have taken a position of support because there are certain elements of the bill that make various changes to how they engage in operational efficiencies in their own boards. So they're specific to them, and they're not responding to the general provision that we've discussed that affects us. So they've taken support on the bill, but only because of the provisions that affect them.
There's different provisions that affect them, and they're healing articles that are.
This is a minority. Yeah, I mean, it's not a bad idea, it's just not necessarily applicable. So would you
Right.
think it has to be exempt from it or something, or just hope you know if it falls?
Well, this is an example of one that I would say we can watch, see how it develops, see if other boards make amendments, and see how it changes.
So in line with what Tara commented earlier about the section in the sunset report about legislation that may impact us that we might want to include in the report, I kind of noted 4 of them that you did. So it was AB 2138 because we're going to monitor that one, and the EO will work with the president on the position if needed. AB 2483 because we're going to support that one. And SB 721 because we're going to oppose and try to work with the author. And then SB 1137 because we're going to support it.
Are we talking about adding this to new issues?
No, the section where it said legislation that
That affects the.
yeah, because you recall it just listed other bills and it didn't have current bills. Okay?
Is that it? Sure. But wait, there's more. We're not done. It's a long meeting. Okay. So the next item is just relating to NCARB stuff that's going to be happening in about 2 weeks. And so Vicki's going to present all those items.
And basically, we're just providing you with the agenda that's for the session. The board members that are authorized to go have already pre-registered and secured their arrangements.
Can you name all of us? The 5 of us go.
Okay. Yeah, John, Sylvia, Tim, Rosa, and Matt.
Good old time.
So,
No, just work. Hit Detroit forward.
yeah. Then the next item agenda K2 is the election for the candidates for NCARB and Region 6 officers and directors. And I went through it, and it appears that there's 1 person for each position. So it looks like there's 2 candidates. So if you want to discuss whether or not you agree with those people running, and it'll advise the delegates going how to vote, whether to support those nominations.
Yeah, so we have John Baker representing our region, Region 6, as the regional director. Is the first step in the national office.
Correct.
Right, so we'll be the chair for him.
And the only potential contested race would have been if our current regional director, Jim Oswald, had decided to run for secretary against Bayless Ward from, he decided not to run, so Bayless is now running on the
Okay.
He's from Bozeman, Montana.
Yeah, one of those rectangles.
John, did you have any input about any of the candidates being nominated?
They're the only ones you can vote for, so.
Yeah.
They're all great.
They're all good, they're all good
They're
candidates.
really good. These people just put in probably hundreds of hours a year in a volunteer. I don't know
So
why they do it,
I think,
including John, but they do.
so I think normally the board would make a motion to support those candidates to cast the votes at the annual meeting once on this.
I certainly,
I second,
You know,
support all the candidates, right?
Yes.
All level. Okay. John Baker,
Aye.
Denise Campos absent, Keon Green, aye, Pascal Gutierrez,
yes,
Sylvia Kwan,
Hi.
Ebony Ruiz,
Aye.
Matthew McGinnis,
Aye.
Robert Tillman, Yelza absent, Barry Williams.
aye.
Great, thank you. We will vote for Slate.
Hopefully you had time to review the 4 resolutions. I know Marcus researched them and had a conversation with John. I believe they're recommending to support all 4. That's yeah. I'm just trying to speed this
Speed it up,
up.
Marcus?
Yeah, Marcus was all prepared to give a presentation on it, but if you guys are comfortable.
I can give you a 90-second presentation.
Perfect.
Seconds.
Okay, so the first resolution is going to align the HSW category of the model law with the rest of the other programs. So just like with HP and IDP, they'll all have the 6 categories.
Right.
And I'm recommending, based on my discussions with Mr. Baker, that we support that. Second one is going to give those who do not have a 4-year professional degree an opportunity of having an ESA. That'll give them that additional avenue was to pursue NCARB certification, recommending therein, supporting. Then there's the model rules of conduct. They're revising them. They're 40 years old and they're going through and they're really restructuring, cleaning them up. There was one item, I believe, Mr. Baker, that you said there was a slight concern on.
There are several, as sharing the procedures in the documents committee, I got the dubious honor, we had to review all of these things ad nauseum. And the final result on the rules of conduct and the bylaws is probably the 8th iteration. And so there's a lot of tweaking, and they pretty much, the board's gone along with most of the feedback that all the regions provided. So they were somewhat controversial and somewhat problematic, but they aren't any longer.
And so the last item, the last resolution is just revising the bylaws and streamlining them, and again, recommending support.
There are 2 points that I'll highlight for you because I think they were subjects of this board a few years ago. One of them has to do with making a determination on a mental impairment of a candidate for licensure. Remember a few years back we had for those of you who were around, I can't even remember now, we had that issue, and our big concern was we're not really qualified to make that determination. So one of the things we got them to put into that code of conduct was that, the determination that the board would use would have to be a determination that was made by a medical professional, not by the board. So little things like that. That was something that was near and dear to our hearts for some extensive conversations I've done.
So if the board's in agreement of supporting all four, I think you can do a joint motion.
One motion.
So,
Second.
who's second?
Robert.
Do this again.
Yep.
5 o'clock, Lily Robert.
Okay, and then John Baker.
Aye.
Denise Campbell absent, Pam Green, aye. Pascal Gutierrez.
Yes.
Sylvia Kwan.
Aye.
Emily Louise. Matthew McGinnis. Robert Freeman. Yota absent, Gary Williams.
Okay, motion passes, great. Okay, I guess, Marcus has one more item, which is OPES.
Okay, so this is the Cse Development Contract. It's an annual item that we bring to the board for their consideration. If you had an opportunity to review it, you may notice that the dollar amount's just slightly less than what it usually is around this time of year. It usually runs around $75,000. The reason for that is we amended this current year's contract and shifted some of the funding, some of the workshops into this fiscal year, and that was all done in response to our goal of reducing the CSE wait time. So the amount has been reviewed, and this will be through the end of the fiscal year, but development over that entire period. So I'm asking, the staff is asking the board to approve the contract.
So moved.
Second.
Motion and a second to approve.
John Baker.
Aye.
Denise Campbell absent, Pam Green, aye. Pascal Gutierrez.
Yes.
Sylvia Kwan.
Aye.
Emily Louise.
Aye.
Matthew McGinnis.
Aye.
Robert Freeman.
Aye.
Yota Serrano absent, Gary Williams.
Okay, motion passes. The long-awaited next item, M. Brianna.
Unfortunately, our chair just had to leave
Oh, no.
for flight.
Oh, we could have moved her up, darn.
Yeah, which is.
Shoot. I feel bad. Oh, well.
Well, I'll do my best to follow Marcus's 90-second
Okay.
footsteps. So we'll be able to achieve that to explain what happened for the public comment. But the LATC for agenda item M.1 did hold our meeting on May 4th here in this very room in Sacramento. We do have some additional public comment in the form of a letter. Your letter with the giant yellow flower on it. Regarding the meeting, so just a very, very quick summation of items discussed. We did review the strategic plan, the strategic plan objective for the sunset report, and they're going to anticipate reviewing it again in July and approving it at that juncture. And then we also did present to them a new website for a strategic plan objective that models the boards, and so they reviewed and approved the mock website, and we hope to launch that before their next meeting in July. So to the item that prompted the public comment, those would be agenda items F and G on the agenda, which is the attachment of M.1. As you recall, we've been working on some time for CCR 2620, which is our regulation where we're going to extend our pathways to licensure, expand them rather. And so those were approved by the committee in November, approved by the board in December. Subsequent to its approval, we realized that there were some minor language tweaks needed to that regulation for the purpose of consistency in reference throughout. We also identified in CCR 2615 a very minor tweak for that because it references 2620, and so it got shifted a little bit. So we presented that to the committee. They approved those changes, and they approved that they come to the board and be submitted to OAL as a joint reg package. When we moved on to agenda item G, and this was something that in November when the committee approved our expanded pathways to licensure, they asked that specifically with regard to our pathway for experience only, that we take a look at how this would impact our ability to certify that experience, because we know that CARB has expressed disinterest in following NCARB's footsteps in sponsoring a structured internship program. And as Patricia asked me to point out, the way that NCARB and CARB monitor experience, I guess, varies a little bit. So they wanted to kind of see how can this be structured. So they asked us to look at our certification of experience form and bring it back to them with a hypothetical. Should these pathways take effect, this is how we would certify experience. What we ended up bringing back was very slight because we realized that the parameters in our regs are such that we can't put criteria. Other states have forms with criteria. They say I got my experience in ABC types of landscape, types of work related to landscape architecture. We don't have that in our regulations to certify that. And so that is what prompted the pause on the progress of these, because the committee does want to explore the ability to expand our forum. And so they tasked staff with conducting research. The states that have on their forms that criteria that a supervisor would say this candidate got their work in these categories. Do they have regulatory authority to do that? What does that look like? How can we expand our own regulation and to include that? So that 50,000 foot level is what took place during the meeting with that item.
So if they're still opposed to an structured internship program, or if you get the form changed and modified regulations, would they be interested in doing something?
The committee is interested in structuring it. We asked CLARB if they would be the ones to implement such a program, and CLARB said that they
So to be clear, the problem isn't just that it's a form, and so now everything's on hold. The problem is that if the board or the committee wants employers to certify and say, this person did project management and this, that, and other tasks, we would have to have a requirement in our regulation to say they must certify or prove that they've had diversified experience or in such and such numbers of fields, or just experience, and the supervisor has to lay it out what the tasks were. Today, there's no requirement to do that. So if there's no requirement for diversified experience or certification of any task, it's not required to be recorded on a form. That's the issue with the forms. What we're looking at is, if we remove the experience requirement in the form, then how do we know these are qualified candidates? So the issue now is, how do we verify what the experience level is, what they've done, because all of this is about public protection and preparing these candidates for work as well as to take the exam. And what does that look like? How does staff receive these forms and then take a look at the diversified experience to determine whether or not these tasks are sufficient to qualify? That's the issue. It's not that it's a form, it's that if we require diverse experience or experience in any number of tasks, how many and what is the qualifier for that? Is it a percentage? Should we even be looking at it all? Is it just a supervisor says, yeah, he worked for me, but we have no idea if we're just getting coffee?
Did your occupational analysis point to categories of experience that can then become part of amendment to the regulations? Because I think that's where you go back to say, okay, so what are the skill sets and what are the percentages?
I have an idea of what to do. I have an idea, it's just complicated and it may continue to hold up the process. As we know, there are people who are waiting on this regulation to go through. So right now, what are the criteria? Potentially, there's a list in the exam itself. What are tasks that should be performed experience-wise to prepare the candidate to take the exam, because that's what this regulation is. Preparing you have to prove that you're ready to take the exam. And that list in the exam is also what prepares these candidates for public work. So it's possible to use that task list. Whether it's a good idea or not, I don't know. I think the committee needs to receive the information that Brianna and her staff have researched to discuss whether it's a good idea or not to add this diversification component to the regulation itself. Because if it's not in there, the board staff and the committee staff can't consider it. It can't even be on the form.
since it's a very architectural design elaborating, so initial task SNAP is look at the two states that was actually break down this experience in a very specific way, grading, planting, project management, and see how they enforce it. They have a regulation that is corresponding to this experience categorization, so we can maybe emulating. But at this moment, unlike NCOP's education equivalent, which are on the committee of a very specific 7 area of practice, landscape architecture does not. So someone has to determine what are these categories we can evaluate the interns or the experience applicant.
And with the people that have the education experience, they also have to have like a nutrition as well.
Not, and well, they have to get experience. So we have an experience requirement. That's
Now,
why.
do they have certain things they have to, or it's just experience brought?
Experience is just experience. See, that's complicated. Now we want accommodate both experience and educational equivalent.
Right.
And we still don't have a
But if I
defined
understand you
category.
right, you said that the exam identifies some specific categories of experience that we already test for, right?
That's true. Exam has a subject. Has subject.
So if the exam already has those categories, then it's sort of, the debate's over because you're already testing for it. Why wouldn't those be the categories that you?
Is the exam already, do you
Is that
do all of those
oversimplifying?
categories? Do you weigh one category more strongly than another category? Do you want, 50% of planning and management over, 20% of something else? Do you want 10% of each one?
Well, I don't even know how many categories you're talking about, but it seems like a place to start because there's already a list, so.
But that is our consideration at the moment.
Yeah.
To think that, so, and what we're researching those states that have, the list
The
of,
breakdowns.
the breakdowns, what are in the regs, does the reg have something that supports that? And then we're also asking staff, how do you operationalize that when you get an application that has, XYZ, ABC checked off as their experience? Is that a criteria for denial if they don't have something? Or, so we're gathering all that research right now to see.
Well, and why would you try to get Clark to do this? Because we wouldn't go to the IA to ask them to do it.
CARB is their,
It's
sort of like NCARB.
Yeah.
So NCARB has AXP, so they went to CARB to see if they would be interested in structure.
Just call it LAXP and, I mean,
LAXP.
LAXP. I mean, here's the thing that,
Sounds like that.
Tara, no wonder it's 9 to 12 months. Okay, it's not just the front end. It is setting up and it's a system from the beginning.
It's an evaluation system that we don't have.
It is huge.
We've had our own for a while.
It's gigantic.
A few times.
Because
I don't think the issue with
Is
the pass the
NCARB
test.
the
I
accrediting
mean, the
body?
test.
No, not accrediting.
So who's
It's a licensing.
So like,
You mean constant
And
testing?
that's what the test is there for.
That's an argument.
This is
Yeah.
huge.
There's so many,
Yeah.
So the experience, they should get the experience, and somebody should sign off. If they don't pass the test, they don't become a landscape architect.
Right.
yeah,
That's what the test is for.
there are so
No,
many
no,
different.
But passing the test without having experience is also a problem. That's
Also
why,
very difficult.
that's what experience is, that's what part
This
of
all
it is.
covered as alternative
I
experience.
feel like we should have like some sort of database,
Education.
like profiles
What's
on
the-
these
That's what
people
landscape architect.
to get their licensure.
On the candidate.
Yes.
One of the-
And if we had a database, then we can verify with, like, through the system to, if they want the experience, like send it out to the people that they put in and then it shoots back out. For them to even like move their profiles forward to the next step. Like we need like a database or some sort of system. So that it's not manual, like nobody should be doing anything with paper. That's just like implemented.
and does this experience have to be under a licensed professional in all cases?
Either by having a license or working.
I mean, one thing to consider is currently, I think they get 1 year credit for an AA degree and the rest of it was based on experience. And there was no structure to that experience and they've been allowing that for a long time. And before the board adopted AXP in 2005, It was decades that we accepted 8 years of experience without any educational credit, and it wasn't structured.
No, just like.
So, yeah, so there's so many different angles of this, and it's kind of like it's gonna have to be thoroughly analyzed and then a recommendation come forward, but what's happening is it's pausing that regulation proposal. And that's what the public, that's what,
So,
The idea is to remove barriers, right? Isn't that where everything's supposed to come from?
and that's
It's
another
not.
thing, that if you do have some kind of structure that they have to meet, you might not have anyone qualifying that's gonna meet that requirement. So, there's a lot of consideration.
And I was sitting in the committee meeting. Yeah, the effort was try to remove the barrier, but in process there is a barrier to remove the barrier.
yeah,
Not really.
seriously.
So we're working on that.
You
Yeah.
better warn these, this group, that perhaps it is gonna take more time than they anticipate. It's not simple. If you wanna, may I use the word professionalize, or however you wanna, whatever term you wanna use, but that if you're trying to mirror or emulate the AXP and the whole thing that it's taken us decades to do, 9 to 12 months is short. If you want to really go that way, if they really, I don't know who wants this, but I mean, I support it big time because it does professionalize the industry, and it exactly, and it puts them at the same level of professionalism as the architects, which we would totally support. But it takes time.
And
It's
I
going to
think
take time.
following up on that too, to give them the knowledge of that too. I mean, to almost explain that, and if you could at some point try to come up with almost a schedule, if you will, about what your milestones would be on trying to get to that point. Otherwise, I can see their side, like, oh, they're just trying to push it down the road and forget about it. And I think the more you could give about, here's what we're trying to do, here's the time frame you see for each one of these, and then they can kind of look at each one of those, that then they see that something is happening. Otherwise, yeah, you just think, hey, they don't want this to happen, they're gonna do it, your mind goes.
Kicking the can down the road.
Yeah.
I mean, there are things that we did, the architects did, I remember, about maybe 15 years ago, which was, remember the whole builders, what were they
Oh,
called?
building designers.
Building designers.
Those guys.
Building designers were neither fish nor fowl, okay? They weren't licensed, well, they were sort of licensed, but they didn't have any degrees and blah, blah, blah. So what they did, just as a hint, is maybe you want to do this for the people who are waiting. There was a grandfathering period, this long. And the grandfathering period said if you've been a building designer for 10 to 20 years or whatever, more than 10 years, you're automatically in as an architect. But starting on such and such date, we're gonna professionalize this whole darn thing. So, I mean, that is something for you to consider for the people that are really, really concerned. I don't know if that's something you want to even think about, but.
It is going to be on our agenda for the July 20th meeting, so I think all of, Patricia, you might express before she left, that she wanted you all to know how much that, the members and her especially are aware that this is a big issue and they want to push it out as much as they can. To your point, right, so that it's obvious that to the public that
I didn't realize what a big, I didn't realize it was such a big.
But are we creating a double standard because architects, I'm hearing a conversation that this experience is supposed to be some sort of a validation of equivalency to those who've got a degree. But it's really not that, because our AXP is not a substitute for a degree. Our AXP is an enhancement to the development of an individual. It's experience, education, and examination. If you go by our table of equivalence, an individual who has never gone to, doesn't have a degree, can get 5 years of experience, right?
It's not structured.
And it's not structured. It's still, and then still call for get the AXP because the AXP is an enhancement, and then take the examination. I don't know why the landscape folks can't do just like we're doing. Instead of trying to, I'm hearing that the experience is supposed to be some sort of a substitute to legitimize the profession. It really shouldn't be that.
No, it's really the application of the knowledge.
The whole conversation to try to have the landscape LATC to emulate that
Broadly experience.
Yeah, broadly experienced candidate.
But we're saying
That's
two
the starting
things.
point.
We're saying two things.
No, that's the one thing.
No. We're saying two things because we, California, will allow someone to become licensed architect if they have 5 years experience, if they complete their AXP, and they pass their exam.
And how the 5 years of experience is documented.
It's just signed
Not
off.
structured, that's why. So that's the message back. Yeah.
That's it.
So, yeah, they can just copy that. We're good. We're good with
Well,
that.
you can always make it more complicated.
But
Your guys' that was after the discussion, the LATC member feel this is inadequate. They want to see the so-called experience is evaluated in certain categories. It couldn't be 5 years just for pulling copies. That's their concern.
Well, maybe it goes back to the grandfather clause that you do that right now to a certain point, and then as you're developing the rest of it, you go along.
Yeah.
So they don't have, let's draw the parallels. They don't have an AXP-like program for those that have gone to platinum degree in licensed architecture. So, you see what I'm saying? It's not equitable.
Well, like Pasquale says, if you just went forward with a program just like an unstructured, seat time basically, for an internship.
Exactly.
You can always come back later in future years if you just if there's a swell of interest in adding more structure to it. That could always happen at a later date.
I mean, we met these folks. They've been working 10, 15, 20 years.
So
They don't know what they're doing.
you might just have the discussion about grandfathering because otherwise it is going to take forever. Some of these people might retire, literally, by the time this thing gets done. It's not going to take just a few weeks or a few months. It's what they're talking about is a big process. And the,
I apologize. No worries. When you say grandfathering, that's just a clause on top of a bunch of other new requirements for people in the future. And the problem is, what should those look like, the new provisions? Right, which I just want to be clear that we can't just add a grandfather clause and we're done and get it moving on. So, and that's the struggle. What should this look like? What's best for public protection, but also allows these people to get licensure now? And we're still working hard toward that, but I think that's a great idea. We can carve out, the sunrise.
Right.
Or we just say any individuals who have submitted on it before a certain date,
with at least 10 years of experience.
You have to get so many years of experience, let that go, but then you have to continue on to the next step.
Oh, yeah.
For the new people.
Exactly. Great. Okay, we have
one more.
What? You have more?
Yeah, sorry. So the other actionable item for today that took place at the LAPC meeting on May 4th was that we did approve our disciplinary guidelines. So as you recall, you approved yours in March. And so in an effort to keep ours in parallel and have similar provisions where possible, we then bulked up our guidelines to match. I'm trying to summarize them quickly. To match what the board has. So that largely included language for citations, fines, civil penalties. We redefined some business and professions sections, not redefined, but made changes to the descriptions. And all the changes in the attachment are shown in highlights. So as mentioned, the committee reviewed and approved it. There were some minor tweaks made during the meeting, but it was substantive to the board. So what we're asking the board today is to also review and approve the LACC's guidelines as well as approve or authorize staff to proceed with a regulation change to amend CCR section 2680.
I've got a lot of paragraph language for this, for the motion. Yeah. I'm just.
I move whatever's on your paragraph.
I will read the motion.
Okay, let's get a second. Yeah, go ahead.
The motion is to approve the proposed regulatory changes as modified, direct the executive officer to take all steps necessary to initiate the rulemaking process, authorize the executive officer to make any technical or non-substantive changes to the rulemaking package, notice the proposed text for a 45-day comment period, and if no adverse comments are received during the 45-day comment period and no hearing is requested, adopt the proposed regulatory changes.
I second.
Okay, so John, were you the motion maker?
Yes. You like how I worded it?
Whatever she said.
Not your
Okay, we
voice.
have a motion and a second.
John Baker.
Aye.
Denise Campus, absent. Keon Bain, aye. Pascal Peters.
Yes.
Sylvia Kwan. Ebony Lewis.
Aye.
Matthew McGinnis. Robert Tillman. Gone. Absent. Elsa Serrano, absent. Gary Williams.
Aye.
All right,
Yeah, you could have write good marks with 90 seconds, you know.
so, motion passes.
You're still
So-
a winner and champion.
We actually have a last, I promise. Last item, which is to review our future board dates. Here they are, item N. Send the voice now. What's it doing? Ah, what's going on? Sorry.
Oh, I'm
Okay.
excited.
They're playing music on me. Okay. So it looks like we do have a meeting on September 12th, which will be in San Francisco, probably at the Port of San Francisco's office. I have not secured the room, so TBD. And then in November, nothing. I mean, it's LATC. And then December, because we have a strategic planning meeting too, that's why it's going to be 2 days. Remember, we do alternate, so this year is 2 days. And will staff send us the? Do we have to make our own hotel reservations, or will you make them for us? Oh, Gabe will contact us. Okay. Okay, that's it. Right. So, and if there's no other business before the board,
To adjourn.
meeting. All right. Thank you, Mr. Thank you guys for a very productive, busy meeting today.
And I will say to all of you,
Oh.